Welcome to Stagecoach, where you'll find the best Western books on the market and the men and women who write them. This podcast is brought to you by Dusty Saddles Publishing, home of the best-selling authors in the Western genre. This is your host, Ginger Winters. Join us as we continue the story of Chosen Path, Book 1 of the Edge of the World series by LeRoy A. Peters.
Chapter 11. Let the Crow Invaders repelled, the Arapaho defenders assessed the situation. Some of their warriors were killed, but most of them were wounded, though not badly. Chief White Antelope and Two Hawks returned with the rest of the warriors who fought the decoys. Although some of the brave men lost their lives in defending their village, they were at least grateful to the man above that none of the women and children were either hurt or captured by the enemy. Things were not as terrible as they could have been. The chief and the elders were also grateful to the two newcomers, who came in and turned the tide in their favor against their long-hated enemy. White Antelope immediately recognized Liam O'Reilly, better known as Raging Bull. The younger white man he did not know, but was amazed and impressed at his height and girth. Raging Bull was talking to Two Hawk's son, Howling Wolf, and the medicine man, Wandering Bear, when they approached the newcomers. "Why, greetings, White Antelope," said Liam in the Arapaho tongue. "It has been a while since we smoked a peace pipe." "It is good to see you again, Raging Bull," responded White Antelope. "I am grateful for what you and your young friend have done for us today." Two Hawks, who also knew Liam and considered him a friend and ally, shared White Antelope's enthusiasm and praise of the trapper. "Had you not come when you did, Raging Bull, I fear we would have lost many more lives than we did," he said. "We are truly in your debt." Liam O'Reilly smiled and nodded. He had known these people about as long as he had lived among the Cheyenne, and considered them as great friends. "Why, there's no debt between friends and brothers, Two Hawks," he said. "Any friend of the Cheyenne are friends of mine, and I will always gladly call the Arapaho Nation my brothers." Before Liam could introduce Azariah, Sweetgrass immediately ran to her father, and excitedly spoke so fast to him that Liam could barely keep up. The trapper spoke and understood both the Cheyenne and the Lakota tongues fluently, but he also had a little difficulty catching certain phrases in Arapaho when the speaker spoke quickly. Azariah was getting nervous, as the girl kept pointing at him when talking to her father. He hoped he hadn't inadvertently done anything that would get him or Liam in any trouble. Two Hawks and Howling Wolf both looked at Azariah while listening to Sweetgrass, neither smiling nor frowning, which made the young man even more nervous. By the time she was done, her father and brother approached Azariah, who had the look of a terrified fawn about to be a grizzly bear's next appetizer. He quickly turned to Liam, who was smiling a wicked grin as if he had just witnessed a cruel joke being played on the greenhorn. Two Hawks stood before the giant teenager. Despite that Azariah was taller than the elder by at least a foot, he sensed this was a man whose bad side he did not want to get on. He noticed at least 8 scalps hanging from Two Hawks' belt, and was thinking that his scalp was about to be added. Suddenly, the Arapaho elder smiled at Azariah that spoke to Liam. Liam patiently listened, and suddenly snickered, before translating what Two Hawks said. "Two Hawks here thanks you for saving the life of his wife and daughter," he said. "His daughter says that other than him and her brother, you are the bravest man that she has ever seen." Azariah turned beet red as he felt the sense of both being flattered and doomed at the same time. He had never been the type of person who wanted to be the center of attention, due to his shy nature. I am honored, sir," said Azariah. "Any friend of Raging Bull is truly a friend of mine." By this time, nearly the entire village had surrounded the newcomers, and some of the older folks were surprised at how young Azariah sounded. He looked older than his voice made him out to be, but he sounded like a teenager. "Who is this brave young man that you have brought among us, Raging Bull?" asked White Antelope. "And how old is he? For he looks like a full-grown man, but his voice says otherwise." Liam snickered before answering. Gasps went through the crowd as they were astonished. Wandering Bear, who had seen 50 summers, said something to Liam that, even though Azariah didn't understand, he recognized the tone of it, especially after Liam guffawed. "Hey, Wandering Bear here says," said Liam before being interrupted. I know, I look like I'm at least 30. Liam laughed even louder before translating back what Azariah said, and that caused everyone to laugh. One of the first lessons that Azariah quickly learned when coming out west was that Indians had a huge sense of humor. The fact that he looked a lot older than he was impressed his newfound friends, especially after how he and Liam helped them repel their enemies, and after they found out an Oglala Lakota medicine man gave him a name that truly fits him. He who walks tall. Chapter 12. After burying their dead and comforting the families of those killed by the Crow, the villagers continued to move to their summer hunting grounds, where the buffalo, elk, deer, and plenty of other game roamed. Liam and Azariah were invited to accompany them. They were the particular guests of the chief White Antelope. Like most of the Plains tribes, the Arapaho did not have a single chief that ruled an entire tribe or even a village. Anyone could be a chief, but only the bravest, wisest, and most responsible were chosen to be leaders or warriors that the people followed. While men like White Antelope were capable leaders, even they did not have singular authority over their village. Decisions that affected the people were made by a council of elders, along with a chief and sub-chiefs. This was a thing that Azariah Hancock quickly learned as he and Liam were having dinner with White Antelope and his family. Another thing that the young greenhorn noticed is that Indians, at least among the Arapaho, take raising children very seriously, including orphans. White Antelope and his wife, Shoots the Enemy Woman, had a total of 7 children. 3 of those children were adopted. Liam informed Azariah that this was very common among tribes, and if one or both parents died or were killed, their children would be taken care of by the tribe. Most likely they were adopted by relatives or friends of their parents. This kind of system of childcare among the tribes was way better than how white orphans are taken care of, Azariah thought to himself. While they were eating dinner, Azariah realized that he and Liam weren't the only guests at the White Antelope's lodge. Two Hawks and his family had arrived earlier, and he, along with White Antelope, were chatting with Liam about his plans and how his Cheyenne relatives were doing. Azariah noticed that Sweetgrass was staring at him and smiling. A little nervous, he smiled back and nodded. A stifled cough from Sweetgrass's brother, Howling Wolf, got his attention. "My sister is beautiful, isn't she?" asked Howling Wolf using sign language. Azariah, who had been learning sign from Liam recently, was picking up on it and managed to answer the young warrior's question with a yes. Howling Wolf smirked and turned to his father and Liam. He said something in his native tongue, which caused the Irishman to snicker. "Well, what is it?" asked Azariah. "Why, it appears you have an admirer, lad," answered Liam. The youth turned beet red. Then Two Hawks said something to Liam, whose grin grew wider. "Why, Two Hawks here wants to know if you are interested in courting his daughter." Azariah's eyes nearly bulged out of their sockets in disbelief. "Is he joking?" "Aye, does it look like he's joking, lad?" asked Liam sarcastically. But I don't know anything about women," said Azariah. "Especially about courting one." "Then you're SOL on that one, lad," laughed Liam. "But hey, like me pop always said, experience is the best teacher." Azariah felt like he was between a rock and a hard place. He looked at Sweetgrass, and for the first time, he saw that she was very beautiful. More beautiful than any woman he had ever seen. Even though she was probably not that much younger than him, most folks would consider her still a child. He as well. "Well, do you want to court the pretty lass or not?" Azariah nodded and then asked, "How does one go about courting an Arapaho lady?" "Oh, it's simple," said Liam. "You both go walking under a blanket or buffalo robe through the village and talk to each other." "Just like that?" "Aye, lad." Azariah thought for a moment before asking some more questions. "Is there anything else I need to know?" "Why, you know how to play the flute?" asked Liam. Azariah shook his head. "Some suitors play the flute when courting a lady," said Liam. Azariah swallowed a bit and then sighed. "Kindly tell Mr. Two Hawks that I would be honored to court his daughter." Liam translated to Two Hawks. Two Hawks said something to his daughter and then asked a question to Azariah that Liam translated. He asked how about now. Azariah almost choked. "Like, right now," he said. "Sure," said Liam. Azariah started to sweat. Sweetgrass immediately got her buffalo robe and approached the young greenhorn. "What do I do?" asked Azariah. "Well, you go out first and she follows you. Then you put the buffalo robe over the both of you," answered Liam. Azariah got up and nervously bowed to Two Hawks and Chief White Antelope before heading out of the tent with Sweetgrass. The boy was as nervous as a condemned prisoner being escorted to the gallows. Just as soon as he and Sweetgrass were outside the teepee, they both could hear laughter from all the men inside. Azariah suspected that his mentor led in that. Chapter 13. It was getting dark, but not dark enough for Azariah to see the whites of Sweetgrass's eyes. "What on earth am I doing?" he asked himself. The young greenhorn was as nervous as an ex-prostitute entering her first church service. Here he was in the middle of an Arapaho village, walking hand in hand with the only daughter of one of the head village elders under a buffalo robe, and he was sweating like a pig. Not wanting to look or act like a village idiot, Azariah decided to break the ice and spoke with Sweetgrass, completely forgetting that she knew no English whatsoever. "It is such a beautiful night, don't you think?" he asked her. Sweetgrass just stared at him, not understanding. Completely embarrassed, Azariah corrected his error and repeated the question using sign language. The girl smiled and nodded. With those perfectly white and even teeth, the young man's knees almost went out from under him before he corrected himself. They continued to walk through the village under the buffalo robe until they bumped into two young men that Sweetgrass immediately recognized. Ottertail and Beaver were both around Azariah's age and had been close friends with Howling Wolf. "Greetings, he who walks tall," said Beaver in English. Azariah was amazed and asked the young man where he learned the white man's tongue. It turns out that his aunt was happily married to a trapper, and they lived in another village not far from White Antelope's village. He often spent time with his aunt, her husband, and their children, and that husband taught him the white man's tongue. "I am impressed," said Azariah. "Maybe soon you, Raging Bull, and Sweetgrass can teach me how to speak Arapaho." Beaver laughed before translating what was said to Ottertail and Sweetgrass. The girl giggled when Ottertail responded. "He says if you continue to court Howling Wolf's sister, you might have to learn it a lot sooner than you think," translated Beaver. Azariah was about to ask Beaver what Ottertail meant by that, but Sweetgrass got his attention by pulling on his sleeve and pointing to the lake, indicating that she wanted to go there for some privacy. Azariah nodded and said his goodbyes to his two new Arapaho friends before walking with Sweetgrass to the lake. They sat down by the edge of the lake on a stone, staring up at the stars for a moment before she got his attention again. "How did you get the name, He Who Walks Tall?" she asked in sign language. Azariah finally managed to get over his shyness and, through his limited knowledge of the universal Indian sign language, explained to Sweetgrass about his meeting with the Ogallala Lakota medicine man High Cloud, and his vision about him given by Wankantonka. He told how he couldn't believe it at first because his own religious beliefs were not the same as the Lakotas, but being the son of a white medicine man, he was taught that sometimes faith shouldn't be questioned, but accepted. "Your father is a medicine man?" asked Sweetgrass with a look of surprise. Azariah smiled and shrugged. "Yes and no," he answered in sign. "Among us whites, holy men are not called medicine men. We don't even call them holy, although we do hold them to higher standards." "What do you call them?" "I don't think there was a word for them in your tongue." Azariah paused for a moment and then said, "Preachers. That is what we call them." Sweetgrass repeated the word over and over again before she got it right, but with a more guttural sound to it. Then through sign, she asked Azariah what his real name is. "Azariah Hancock." "Azariah," she repeated. "Azariah Hancock." Azariah snickered. He found himself liking this pretty, obviously intelligent Arapaho maiden. As she was saying his full name over and over again, he thought to himself, "What will my parents think? Courting an Indian maiden, a heathen, to be exact." He remembered his father telling him that we are all God's children, black, white, red, Christian, and heathen alike. But did he have in mind his only son courting a heathen Indian girl? Azariah was brought out of his reverie when he felt Sweetgrass's hand touch his hair. She was gently pulling it while she was smiling at him. "What is it?" he asked in sign. "I like your hair," she answered. "I've never seen such red hair before." Suddenly, Azariah's blood began to rise, but his shyness and nervousness returned as well, so he felt compelled to ask, "Have you ever kissed a man before?" Sweetgrass giggled and slowly shook her head. "I have never kissed a woman," said Azariah. "May I kiss you?" Sweetgrass nodded, as Azariah gently lifted her chin with his huge hand and kissed her. It was only for a moment, but for both of them, it felt like a young bear getting its first taste of honey and being immediately hooked. Azariah enjoyed it, but was concerned whether Sweetgrass felt the same. She confirmed it when she wrapped her arms around his neck and gave him another kiss. This time, it lasted a hell of a lot longer than the first. Chapter 14. Azariah and Liam stayed with the Arapahoes for a week. During that time, Azariah spent what little free time he had courting Sweetgrass, under the watchful eye of her father, Two Hawks. Apparently, since their first kiss, the young maiden had been walking around with a huge grin on her face as if she were on cloud nine. Azariah, for his part, would help around the village and learn the Arapaho language as much as he could, so he can converse with Sweetgrass. About 2 nights after their first kiss, they were by the lake enjoying a second kiss, only to be caught by Two Hawks and Wandering Bear, the medicine man. Since then, Azariah was only allowed to court Sweetgrass near her parents' lodge, which was okay with him, except her brother, Howling Wolf, and Liam were both pains in his ass, continually teasing him, which drove the young lovesick greenhorn up the wall. By the following week, Liam was eager to be on the move, waiting to see his Cheyenne relatives and in-laws. The very day they were to depart, Sweetgrass approached Azariah with a gift. It was a puppy from one of the village dogs. Azariah was pleased with his gift, and promised Sweetgrass, come hell or high water, he would return. "And I will make sure he will keep that promise," said Liam with a grin. Suddenly, Azariah removed a crucifix from his neck. "My mother gave me this," he said as he gave it to Sweetgrass. "I would be honored if you wear it." Sweetgrass turned to her father as if asking for permission. Two Hawks nodded, and Azariah had her turn around as he put his necklace around her neck. "Will you return?" asked Sweetgrass. "Yes, I will." She then kissed him fully on the lips, shocking her parents. Public displays of affection between courting couples were considered taboo among the tribes, and the Arapaho were no exception. Two Hawks and Claybasket liked Azariah, but felt that the giant white boy had somehow put a spell on their only daughter, which worried them. However, Howling Wolf, Wandering Bear, Ottertail, and Beaver felt that it was Sweetgrass who may have put a spell on him. Of course, no one would dare say that to Two Hawks to his face. "All right, it's time to get a move on, Romeo," said Liam. Azariah reluctantly released his embrace of Sweetgrass, took the puppy, tucked it in his coat, and hopped on his horse. As they rode out of the village of White Antelope, Azariah paused for a moment, turned his horse around, and raised his hat to the villagers as he waved goodbye. The villagers responded with cheers and whoops. Liam just sat there on his horse, grinning as usual. "Oh, what are you smiling about?" asked Azariah. "You truly have the makings of a mountaineer," answered the Irishman. Azariah smiled at the praise, then looked at the small puppy, who was licking his face. It was a male, and Azariah automatically fell in love with it. Then his thoughts quickly turned to Sweetgrass. As if reading his young protege's thoughts, Liam spoke. Don't worry, lad. You will see her again." "How can you be so sure?" "Aye, simple. The Arapahoes and the Cheyennes are not only close allies, their territories are not that far from each other." "Oh," said Azariah. Liam looked at the dog. "What are you going to name him?" "I'm going to name him Gideon," answered Azariah. Good name," said Liam. The duo, along with their new pet, headed to the north towards Cheyenne country. Chapter 15. A couple of weeks later, the duo and their new pet Gideon arrived at the Cheyenne village of Black Cloud, near the Tongue River. Black Cloud was a head chief and leader in this village, and a longtime friend of Liam. He and the Irishman were the same age, and had been on many hunts and battles together. As he watched his friend arrive with a stranger who was a giant, he felt the presence of another friend stand beside him. It was none other than He-Dog, Liam's father-in-law. He-Dog was much older than both Black Cloud and Liam, which made him an elder of the council. Black Cloud often went to him for advice concerning the village, family, and even the council itself. Black Cloud may have been the leader and head chief, but he quickly and humbly recognized that he did not have sole authority over the village or the warriors who protected the village. However, people followed him, because even as young as he was a proven leader in the eyes of the people and those in the council. He-Dog was one of two of his closest supporters and allies when he was made chief. The other was Liam, who, despite not being born a Cheyenne, as an adopted Cheyenne, he sat on the council, and like Black Cloud, had proven himself a loyal and brave warrior who put the people's interests over his own. To see the man now called Raging Bull return after being gone many moons was a reason to celebrate. He-Dog knew that Liam loved his daughter very much, and her loss and the loss of her baby at the hands of the Crow nearly destroyed him, despite avenging their deaths. He-Dog had long worried over his son-in-law's state of mind, for Liam had not remarried, nor even thought about seeking another woman. However, the elder respected Liam's space and privacy, and didn't push. He planned to talk to him about it later, but right now wasn't the time. He was happy to see him again, and wanted to meet this new stranger he brought. Liam and the stranger stopped their horses in front of He-Dog and Black Cloud. "Aye, greetings, Black Cloud," said Liam in the Cheyenne tongue. "Welcome home, Raging Bull," responded Black Cloud. "It has been many moons." "Aye, too long if you ask me, me brother," said Liam. The Irishman paused and then turned to He-Dog. He gave his father-in-law a huge hug, rekindling the bond between them. "Welcome home, my son," said He-Dog. "It is good to see that Mahio hath protected you." "That and more, father," said Liam. Liam quickly noticed the approach of his brother-in-law, Spotted Eagle, his wife Red Sun, and their 3 sons, Sparrow, Badger, and Black Wolf. The Irishman felt like he had truly returned home to family. "It is good to see you again, brother," said Spotted Eagle. "I likewise, Spotted Eagle," responded Liam. "Mahio shines on you and your loved ones, I see." "We have much to be thankful for," responded Spotted Eagle. "I scarcely know where to begin." By this time, 2 more of He-Dog's sons, Pawnee Killer and Thundercloud, arrived, along with their mother Songbird and their sister Red Willow, and her husband Running Fox. By the time they came to greet Liam and his friend to welcome them home, the whole village had surrounded them. Some of the children were asking Liam a dozen questions all at once before their grandparents gently silenced them, and allowed the Irishman to introduce his new friend. "Friends and family," said Liam, "allow me to introduce to you my young friend, he who walks tall." Azariah smiled and waved at everyone as Liam translated his introduction to the village. Chief Black Cloud looked approvingly at the young man and quickly welcomed him. "Any friend of Raging Bull is a friend of mine, and my people," he said in English. Azariah was amazed at how well the Cheyenne chief spoke his tongue. "Well, thank you," he said. "Did Raging Bull, teach you the white man's tongue?" Black Cloud smiled and nodded. "How did you get the name He Who Walks Tall?" Azariah looked at Liam. "Aye, don't look at me, lad. It's to you he asked a question." The youth smiled and said, "A Lakota medicine man named High Cloud gave me this name." Black Cloud translated to the rest of the family and village. Many of the elders and warriors nodded in approval and were impressed at the name given to Azariah, but were still surprised at his voice. He looked like a full-grown man and more, but sounded like a young boy. He-Dog, who also spoke English, but only spoke with white men he knew and trusted like Liam, asked Azariah his age. The young man smiled as he saw an impish grin on Liam's face before he answered He-Dog's question. "I have seen 14 winters." Both He-Dog and Black Cloud were amazed and amused at the same time, and showed it before the elder translated to the people, who were likewise amazed that one so young could be so big and tall. 14 winters!" exclaimed Pawnee Killer and Cheyenne. "You look like you've seen at least 30. Everyone laughed, including Azariah. Even though he didn't speak the Cheyenne tongue, he knew the tone and didn't need to hear the translation. Pawnee Killer was the second eldest of He-Dog and Songbird's 5 children, and he was also a known prankster. However, he was also considered one of the most underrated warriors as far as bravery went among the village, and along with his eldest brother, Spotted Eagle, was a member of the Dog Soldiers. Liam quickly introduced He-Dog, Songbird, and the rest of his in-laws to Azariah, who greeted them with his usual humility and respect. Toward Songbird, Red Sun, and the wives of Spotted Eagle, Pawnee Killer, and Thundercloud, he gave a bow while doffing his hat. The women thought this humorous, even though Liam had explained to them that this is how a white gentleman greets a lady. Thundercloud and Running Fox noticed a dog standing next to Azariah and assumed it was a gift for dinner. Among many of the Plain tribes, including the Cheyenne and the Arapaho, a dog was considered a delicacy. It was also Thundercloud and Running Fox's favorite dish, and greatly appreciated every time their wives cooked it for dinner. Liam O'Reilly knew this and quickly informed them that Gideon belonged to He Who Walks Tall and was not food but a pet. Thundercloud just shook his head and laughed, while Running Fox had a dumbfounded look on his face. "That dog is your pet?" asked Running Fox to Azariah. The boy nodded after the question was translated by He-Dog. "You white men are strange indeed." "Why would you say that?" asked Azariah, hurt. "Because why keep an animal as a pet and give it a name, as if it is family, when one day you might have to eat it?" answered Running Fox. Azariah thought for a moment and pondered the warrior's statement. It made a lot of sense, but Gideon was more than just a pet and a friend to him. "My dog was a gift given to me by a special woman." Liam translated the statement and noticed that there were smirks on some of the men's faces, including He-Dog, Black Cloud, Spotted Eagle, and even Running Fox. "Ah, she must be very special to give you such a gift that you were willing to treat it more like family than food," said Running Fox. Azariah turned beet red. Everyone immediately knew that the warrior was spot on. "We should discuss this later," said He-Dog. "Raging Bull is home, and he has brought a new friend to the people. You are both welcome in my lodge." "Hey, thank you, father," said Liam. "I am looking forward to Mother Songbird's cooking again." Everyone laughed, including Songbird, who by her admission was not the greatest cook among Cheyenne women. Her husband often teased her about it, and Liam always said she was too modest. However, her son-in-law was a bad flatterer like her husband. "Tell He Who Walks Tall that because he is a guest, I will cook a special dish for him," said Songbird. He-Dog translated to Azariah, who then had anticipation on his face. I am honored, ma'am," he said. "What special dish will you be serving?" Songbird pointed to Gideon, and Azariah's expression turned to a look of horror. "No, please, not my dog!" Everyone in the village busted out laughing at Songbird's practical joke on the giant youth. Chapter 16. The following weeks were busy for the entire village of Black Cloud. It was now the middle of July, and the buffalo had returned. Liam and Azariah had joined He-Dog, Spotted Eagle, Pawnee Killer, and Thundercloud, along with some of the younger boys who weren't yet warriors, but old enough to go on a hunt, to ride out to the herd and bring in some meat. The buffalo herd was at least 3 miles from the village, and, as usual, far from being a small one. Once the hunters came upon them, Azariah couldn't help but be amazed at how many buffalo there were. At least in this herd, there looked to be enough to feed the entire Cheyenne nation, if not every tribe in the northern Rockies. At least that is what Azariah thought. Liam had explained earlier the night before to Azariah how the buffalo would be hunted. They would be going on a surround, in which the hunters would cause a stampede and run down the shaggy beasts. Sometimes hunters would use both the lances or bows and arrows while riding from the backs of their horses to bring down a beast. "It sounds pretty dangerous," said Azariah. Liam smiled. "It is dangerous, lad." "Then why hunt that way?" asked Azariah. "Wouldn't it be easier and safer if they just used a bow and arrow from a safe distance and took the buffalo down that way?" "Well, there's a bloody fun in that," laughed the Irishman. "Oh, you live out here long enough and you will learn there is no way of hunting a dangerous animal is safe." Liam paused for a moment before continuing. Sometimes you just have to live for the moment, and that is why lots of Indians and trappers alike go on a buffalo surround. It's the excitement of the hunt that gets the blood running." Azariah thought for a moment, then smiled. "I see your point." As they approached the herd, Azariah thought about Sweetgrass. He prayed he wouldn't get hurt, or worse, get killed on this hunt. He wanted to see her again. At that moment, he removed the thought from his mind and focused on the task at hand. When He-Dog whooped a loud yell, which signaled the rest of the hunting party to move. The whooping and hollering had the intended effect as the herd moved in the direction the hunters wanted them to go. Liam, on his white Appaloosa stallion, was riding at top speed following Spotted Eagle, who had already loosed 5 arrows into a buffalo cow. The beast immediately went down at full speed after the 5th arrow hit a vital organ. Liam had shot a bull with his Pennsylvania rifle, hitting the heart, which caused his demise before he reloaded almost as quickly as his brother-in-law was firing arrows. Azariah, along with Running Fox and Pawnee Killer, were right behind them. The youth managed to hit a cow with his rifle, but the beast didn't go down. He missed an organ. Reloading while in the middle of riding his black stallion at full speed was a difficult feat, but he managed to do so and caught up with the wounded animal, firing a second shot, this time hitting the heart. The greenhorn whooped like a full-blooded Cheyenne in rejoicing. Pawnee Killer, who had just taken down a bull, quickly rode up to Azariah and patted him on the back, knowing that this was the first time he had hunted buffalo during a surround. Then suddenly a look of horror came to the faces of both men when a wounded and enraged bull knocked 12-year-old Sparrow off his horse. Sparrow's horse got the worst of it as the buffalo's horns ripped open his belly. Sparrow had the wind knocked out of him as he landed on his side. Fortunately, nothing was broken. He was back on his feet, just as the enraged bull turned his attention to him. Spotted Eagle was too far away to reach his son in time. All he could do was yell. However, Pawnee Killer and Azariah were closer. As the boy ran for his life, his uncle unleashed arrow after arrow into the bull, which was closing in on him. Filled with adrenaline and testosterone and rage, the arrows appeared to have little effect on the 7-foot, nearly 1,200-pound beast that was less than a hair's breadth from ramming its deadly horns into the boy. Suddenly, a loud bang sounded, and the buffalo bull immediately fell a few feet from Sparrow. The boy was quivering as the beast lay dead at his feet. He didn't even notice his father, uncles, grandfather, along with Liam approaching. "Are you all right?" asked a concerned Spotted Eagle as he jumped off his horse and hugged his son. He-Dog and the others immediately dismounted and ran lances through the beast just to make sure it was dead. I am okay, father," said Sparrow. "At least I think I am." Where did that shot come from?" asked Liam as he examined the dead bull and noticed a huge hole near the heart. "You didn't shoot the beast, Raging Bull?" asked He-Dog. Liam shook his head. "It couldn't have been Raging Bull," said Spotted Eagle. "He was with me, and we were too far to even get into range to save my son." Just then, Azariah rode up with his blunderbuss still smoking. "It was he who walks tall that saved your son, my brother," said Pawnee Killer. "When my arrows couldn't slow down the beast, I saw him aim his strange rifle at it." So that's where the loud bang came from," laughed Liam. "I forgot you had a blunderbuss with you, lad." Just as soon as Azariah dismounted, Spotted Eagle approached him and put his hands on the boy's shoulders. "I am forever in your debt." "I'm just glad I was able to help," said Azariah. "But I didn't do this alone. Pawnee Killer must have unleashed a dozen arrows into that monster." Pawnee Killer was flattered and humbled by the youth's praise, but refused to take credit for saving the life of his nephew. "It was your thunderstick that killed the bull and saved Sparrow's life, he who walks tall." Liam and He-Dog, along with others, patted Azariah on the back, while Sparrow walked up and thanked him for saving his life. Azariah just smiled and nodded. Not one to enjoy attention, good or bad, Azariah remained tight-lipped. This did not go unnoticed, for Liam and He-Dog tried to let him know what he had done was no small thing, and he should be proud. Thundercloud then approached the buffalo, cut it open, and took out its heart. He offered the severed organ to Azariah, who at first was a little hesitant, but Liam encouraged him to accept it and take a bite. The greenhorn did and chewed the bloody meat, and even savored it. "It's good," he said. Everyone cheered and whooped as Azariah then handed the buffalo heart to Sparrow, who accepted and took a bite. Liam just smiled at his protege and said, "Lad, you truly have the makings to be a mountaineer." Chapter 17. After the hunt, a great feast was held in Azariah's honor. Hunting a herd of buffalo by way of a surround was the most dangerous method of hunting in the West. But when it came to hunting those huge shaggy beasts, there was no truly safe method. Buffalo, like the equally dangerous and ferocious grizzly bear, were notoriously hard to kill, whether by bows and arrows, lances, or firearms. They were created with a built-in body armor of fat and a thick layer of skin, standing between 6 to 7 feet at the shoulder. On all fours and weighing up to at least 1,500 pounds, the American buffalo or bison is a formidable animal. Even the feared grizzly bear and pack of wolves, which are its two main predators other than man, approach it with a sense of caution. Many hunters, both white and red alike, had been killed by the giant shaggy beasts, either gored to death or worse, stampeded by an entire herd. The buffalo was truly an animal not to be underestimated. The fact that no one was killed on this hunt was considered a true miracle and a blessing from Aheo himself, according to the village of Black Cloud. Azariah felt that saving Sparrow's life was nothing, since he would have done it for anyone, or Sparrow would have done the same thing for him. However, to Sparrow's family and the Cheyenne boy, it was a big deal. Azariah, who was only 2 years older than Sparrow, felt he found himself a new friend. That at least didn't bother him at all. Liam was more like a big brother to Azariah than a close friend. And since the greenhorn didn't have any brothers of his own back in Maryland, not to mention many friends. It wasn't long before he and Sparrow started hanging out together. During the next couple of days, Azariah through sign language was learning the Cheyenne tongue from Sparrow and his brothers, Badger, who was 9, and Black Wolf, who was 7. In return, he was teaching them English and also how to use a rifle and a blunderbuss. When they weren't learning each other's languages, the boys would go fishing and horse racing around the village. The boys also enjoyed watching Azariah train Gideon to do tricks, as well as teaching the pup lessons on how to obey and follow commands. During the rest of the summer, Azariah was starting to miss the Arapahoes, Sweetgrass in particular. He mentioned as much to Liam and asked when they would return to the village of White Antelope. Liam assured his young friend that they would return, but it would be a while. We have to help the village head to their winter camp, he said. Fall will be coming soon, and after we're done with that, we still have to head to my cabin in the Beartooth Mountains. How long will that take? Asked Azariah. I don't know, lad, said Liam. Trapping season starts around the same time the village reaches their winter camp, and that is when your lessons start. Azariah looked depressed. He missed Sweetgrass, and he also missed his friends from her village, Beaver and Ottertail. He liked hanging out with Sparrow and also learning the Cheyenne language and their culture as well. He felt right at home, just like he did among the Arapahoes, but for some reason it didn't feel the same, for he wanted Sweetgrass. He couldn't stop thinking about her, and the pup Gideon often reminded him of her, since she was the one who gave him to Azariah as a gift. Azariah quickly noticed his friend smirking. What are you smiling about? I know you miss your little Arapaho Juliet. Shut up. The Irishman laughed and patted the greenhorn on his back. Relax, lad, he said. You will see her again soon. Remember, the Arapahoes and the Cheyenne are close allies, and don't live that far from each other. How far is your cabin? Asked Azariah. You said it was somewhere in the Beartooth Mountains? About a couple of days' ride northwest from here. Azariah huffed under his breath. He feared he might not see Sweetgrass again until the end of the year, and it was almost August already. I don't know if I could wait until trapping season starts, Liam. Good things come to those who wait, lad, said the Irishman. Besides, if it is love, she will wait for you. Azariah's spirits lifted a bit, and he smiled at his mentor. Okay, whatever you think is best. At that moment, Spotting Eagle approached with 3 fine horses. He was followed by Sparrow and He-Dog. He who walks tall. I wish to gift you these horses as a token of my thanks, said Spotted Eagle in Cheyenne. Azariah had picked up much of the language as fast as he picked up the Arapaho tongue. Thank you, Spotted Eagle, but I have done nothing to deserve such gifts. You saved my eldest son's life, responded Spotted Eagle. If that is not worthy of a gift, I do not know what is. Azariah knew enough that to not accept would mean an insult, so he didn't reject the presents. I accept these gifts with great joy, he said, but your son's friendship, as well as the friendship of the people, is truly a gift beyond measure. The warrior and his father were impressed and touched, and they let the youth know it. I trust that these 3 horses will make a great bride price, said He-Dog. Azariah was dumbfounded. A bride price? For who? The Cheyenne elder gave an impish grin. For this Arapaho girl you like so much that Raging Bull keeps talking about. Azariah turned beet red as he chased his mentor all over the village. Liam, you big-mouthed Irish son of a bitch! Chapter 18. It was October, and the village of Black Cloud had moved to their winter camp south of what is now Denver, Colorado. During the summer, they had stocked up on meat, drying it on racks to save for times such as this. Azariah and Liam headed to the Beartooth Mountains at the beginning of September to prepare for the fall trapping season. Azariah, as usual, was an adept student of the trade. Checking his traps 3 times a day, he caught at least 50 beaver his first week, a feat that impressed Liam. During their free time, they would stretch out their pelts so they would be sleek and catch a good price once they traveled back to St. Louis after the spring trapping season. Under the Irishman's tutelage, Azariah also became an adept hunter, bringing back elk, moose, and even bighorn sheep, which was Liam's favorite. After making pemmican from their hunts, the duo cached their beaver plows, which were now numbered 120, near the cabin and traveled out of the Beartooth Mountains down to the Yellowstone region to look for new trapping grounds. Gideon was getting big and became a dutiful companion to both his master and his mentor. He quickly learned how to be obedient and learned some hunting tricks that came in handy every time. Azariah went out hunting by himself. The animal also became an excellent watchdog, keeping a lookout for enemies on both the 4- and 2-legged variety. From the Beartooth Mountains to the Yellowstone River were considered Crow country, and the Crow, as Azariah knew, had an ongoing feud with Liam and the Cheyenne, as well as the Arapaho. But they weren't the only enemy tribe the duo had to be on the lookout for. Where they were traveling was also known to be the favorite invading spot of the dreaded members of the Blackfoot Confederacy, whose territory was farther north towards Canada, in the area now known as Glacier National Park. Called Bugs Boys by the trappers, the Blackfeet were known as the Lords of the Northern Plains, and they were considered enemies of nearly every other tribe of the Northern Plains, such as the Flathead, Nez Perce, Shoshone, Lakota, Cheyenne, Arapaho, Cree, Chippewa, Assiniboine, and the Crow. They were allies of the Atsinot tribe, who the trappers called Gros Ventre, but they were not related. The Blackfoot Confederacy consisted of 3 clans: Siskiyou, Blackfoot proper, Piikani, Piegan, and Kaina, Blood. Even though their territory was north of the Beartooth Mountains, they traveled wherever they pleased. The Blackfeet, along with their Atsinot allies, went where the buffalo went, and had no problem invading other tribes' territories. Their main and biggest tribal enemy was the Crow, but they hated the trappers more than they hated any other enemy they had ever had. Liam mentioned this much to Azariah as they traveled to the Yellowstone. "Why don't the Blackfeet like us?" asked Azariah. "You ever heard of Meriwether Lewis, lad?" responded Liam. "From the Lewis and Clark expedition?" "The same." "What does he have to do with them?" asked Azariah. "John Coulter told me that on their way back from the west, they camped near the Two Medicine River region in Blackfoot country," said Liam. "And one night, some teenage Piegan boys wanted to make a name for themselves, so they tried to steal Meriwether Lewis's horse. And that didn't end so well." Azariah wasn't sure he liked where this was heading. "And one of the men from the expedition, George Drouillard was his name, he was half Shawnee Indian and half French, was fighting with one of those boys because he was trying to steal his rifle," said Liam. "In the end, Meriwether Lewis ended up shooting not 1 but 2 of those teenagers in the back." "That's terrible," said Azariah. "What you have told me, Indians don't consider it stealing. If you are unable to look after your belongings, didn't you say it was like a game to them?" "Aye, lad," answered Liam. "But from what John Coulter told me, old Captain Lewis wasn't right in the head and felt that shooting 2 unarmed Blackfoot teenagers in the back was a solution to keep them from stealing." "So the Blackfeet have held a grudge against all white men because of that?" "Aye, lad," answered Liam. "But I believe it goes a bit deeper than that, though." "How so?" "Well, the Blackfeet are very warlike, just like any other tribe," said Liam. "Don't get me wrong, I believe they are fighting to protect what is theirs, just like any other tribe in these parts. That is why I don't go trapping in their country for any reason." "You know trappers who have?" asked Azariah. "Aye," answered Liam. "Me good friend, John Coulter, and that nearly cost him his life twice, and George Drouillard, who wasn't as lucky as John." Azariah sensed some sadness coming from his mentor and friend. "As far as them hating and holding a grudge against white men, I wouldn't go that far," said Liam. "I know trappers that have worked for the damn Hudson Bay Company and have managed to trade with them." "I remember you telling me about them," said Azariah. "Goes with you saying that trappers have more to fear from each other than they do from Indians." "Exactly, lad," said Liam with a grin. They managed to reach the Yellowstone River and set up camp. While Azariah was getting the fire started and preparing coffee, Liam searched the perimeter around the river and found many beaver lodges. Once he was satisfied, he returned to camp just in time, as the coffee was ready and Azariah was cooking some biscuits and beans, along with some jerked elk meat from their stores. "Find any beaver lodges?" asked the youth as he handed the cup of coffee to the Irishman. "Aye, plenty, lad," answered Liam. "We start setting our traps in the morning." At that moment, Gideon was growling at the opposite side of camp, and the horses that were staked out there were whinnying frantically. Azariah and Liam quickly grabbed their rifles as they immediately saw the cause for the commotion approaching out of the darkness. A huge male grizzly bear crawled into the firelight, smelling the food that Azariah had cooked, wanting to investigate. "Tell your dog to be silent and don't move a muscle, lad," cautioned Liam. Azariah knew better than to question his mentor, especially at times such as this. Grizzly bears were extremely dangerous and notoriously hard to kill, especially if they were in a killing mood. This beast was larger than most Liam had ever seen. On average, a male grizzly stood at 6 feet to the shoulder, while on all fours. But this one stood at nearly 9 feet to the shoulder, on all fours, and probably weighed about as much as an adult buffalo. He's probably just investigating, whispered Liam. They have very poor eyesight, but a terrific sense of smell. Is that supposed to make me feel better? Asked Azariah, not taking his eyes off the beast. The Irishman slowly shook his head. Azariah had quietly told Gideon to stand still and be silent. But the dog, sensing danger and feeling bravado, not only growled, but charged at the huge Bruin. "Aye, goddammit!" shouted Liam. The grizzly immediately stood on his hind legs as the dog charged to attack. Gideon leaped up at the beast, but in mid-leap, the grizzly swiped the dog with his huge right paw, as if it were a pesky little insect. Gideon yelped as he was knocked 10 feet into a tree. Seeing his pet in trouble, Azariah immediately picked up his Pennsylvania rifle, aimed, and fired into the chest of the old Ephraim, as the trappers called the grizzly bear. The bullet found its mark, but instead of downing the giant beast, it only pissed him off to the 10th degree. The grizzly roared as he returned to all fours and charged. "Scatter!" shouted Liam as he fired his rifle at the beast, its bullet finding its mark, hitting the animal below the shoulder. Azariah ran to get his blunderbuss and managed to turn around just in time to see old Ephraim coming at him. "Get your ass up in a tree, Azariah!" shouted Liam as he was quickly reloading his rifle and trying to chase the grizzly to get him away from his young friend. But Azariah was momentarily paralyzed with fear. The grizzly stood on his hind legs and was about to tear the young trapper apart. However, in that split second, Azariah raised his loaded blunderbuss and fired into the chest of the beast. Before he knew it, everything went black. Chapter 19. Meanwhile, back at the foot of the Wind River mountain range, the Arapaho village of White Antelope had just finished setting up for winter. Early that morning, Sweetgrass had suddenly awakened in a cold sweat. Ever since meeting the giant white boy he called Azariah, she couldn't stop thinking about him. She would have dreams of them together as husband and wife, raising a whole passel of children. She would often tell her mother Claybasket and the medicine man Wandering Bear about these dreams. Claybasket would pass it off as the childish fantasy of a young girl, but Wandering Bear thought otherwise. Like most people in the village, he liked Azariah, or He Who Walks Tall, as he was known to the tribes. There was something about the young man that showed that he was destined to walk a certain path chosen by the man above, and that Sweetgrass was meant to be by his side, not just as a wife and mother to his children, but also as someone to guide him on that path. Wandering Bear remembered what Liam O'Reilly told him about how a Lakota medicine man gave Azariah the name, He Who Walks Tall, which gave the Arapaho medicine man lots of food for thought. He accepted that maybe the giant white youth was chosen by the Great Spirit to walk a certain path in his life, and that Sweetgrass was chosen to be his wife. However, he wouldn't dare tell Two Hawks or Claybasket that. Not to their faces, at least. Sweetgrass's parents had nothing against Azariah, for he was not just a friend of Raging Bull, but a proven, honorable man in his own right. That still didn't mean they were too excited about their only daughter being married to a white man. Two Hawks himself expressed concerns about this to Sweetgrass, but Howling Wolf would often try to convince his father that Sweetgrass could do much worse than taking Azariah for a mate. That is, she would ever see him again, which was a cause of her current dilemma, as she continued to wipe the cold sweat from her brow. "Bad dream?" asked Claybasket. Sweetgrass nodded to her mother as she slowly got out from under the buffalo robes and managed to get dressed. The sun hadn't yet risen, but it was not unusual to find Claybasket awake and getting the morning meal ready at this time, for she had always been a light sleeper. She sensed that something was bothering her daughter. "You were thinking about him again?" "How did you know?" asked Sweetgrass. "I'm your mother. I always know these things." Sweetgrass left the lodge to go down to the lake to wash herself up. The weather was colder than most mornings in the middle of autumn, but it wasn't freezing yet. She quickly returned to help her mother get things ready for breakfast, but her father and brother were still asleep. "Your father and I have been meaning to talk to you about He Who Walks Tall," said Claybasket. Sweetgrass knew where this was going. "He is a good man, and we know you care greatly for him, but he is still a white man." "Why should that be important?" asked Sweetgrass. "Your father and I have lived long enough to know that these trappers, especially white trappers, cannot be trusted." Sweetgrass gave a slow sigh, but her mother gently put her hand on her shoulder to calm her. "Raging Bull is one of our dearest friends, and his heart is good without question. And maybe the same goes for He Who Walks Tall," she said. "But there are exceptions, compared to most of their kind.
Maybe he who walks tall is the only exception I need, said Sweetgrass. My heart belongs to him, not his entire race.
Claybasket chuckled.
Mother, how did you know that father was the right one for you?
Asked Sweetgrass. Before her mother could answer, her father spoke as he was just getting up from his buffalo robes. I gave your grandfather 10 fine horses for your mother's hand, he blurted out. Claybasket just gave her husband a sarcastic look, as he chuckled while getting dressed to head out to the lake to wash himself up, but not before giving his son a swift kick in the rump to wake him up out of bed, just as the sun was finally coming up. Later that afternoon, near the Yellowstone River, Azariah Hancock was just waking up to a splitting headache and very sore ribs. I praise Jesus, Mary, Martha, and Joseph, shouted Liam O'Reilly. For a minute there, I thought you were gone, Beaver. What happened? Asked Azariah. I feel like a whale just fell on me. The Irishman chuckled. More like old Ephraim after you put a hole the size of grape shot into his chest. Suddenly, the youth remembered the grizzly bear and nearly popped out of his blanket, regretting it as he grabbed his ribs. Just rest, lad, said Liam. I didn't feel any broken bones, but that was one huge beast you killed that fell on top of you. As Azariah laid back down, he felt Gideon licking all over his face. The boy raised his head a little to check the pup and noticed some cuts near his ribs. The dog was lucky, said Liam. You need to work on him a little more, so he can learn to obey your commands better. The youth just nodded and relaxed again. You hungry, lad? Asked Liam. Starving, said Azariah. What are you cooking? The Irishman smiled. Grizzly stew. Chapter 20. In less than 2 weeks, Azariah was back on his feet. Gideon took a little bit longer to get back to his normal self after the bear tag, but he came along nicely and didn't slacken his duties as a guard dog. Azariah and Liam continued to trap along the Yellowstone River and managed to get over 200 pounds of beaver pelts. By near the end of the fall trapping season, they headed back to Liam's cabin in the Beartooth Mountains to retrieve their cache of pelts. They were already planning for the spring trapping season when they got back to the cabin. To Azariah's delight, the Irishmen decided that they were going to trap in the Wind River Mountain Range in Shoshone country. It just so happened they would be near White Antelope's village. Although the Shoshone were historically friendly to trappers, they were longtime enemies of the Arapaho Nation, which could mean some trouble for the duo. However, Liam has had some dealings with the Shoshone, and many of them considered him a friend and ally, despite his friendship with the Arapaho, and also an adopted Cheyenne, who were also not exactly on good speaking terms with the Shoshone. A couple of days after returning to the cabin, Azariah had finished tanning the grizzly bear hide. Considering how difficult it was due to the size of the great beast, the youth was very proud of his work. The Irishman had taught him well, and was very impressed with Azariah's handiwork after inspecting it. I have a present for you, lad, said Liam. He handed Azariah a necklace made out of what appeared to be claws. Grizzly bear claws. Among the tribes, it is considered great medicine when a man kills such a huge beast. The boy smiled as he accepted the gift. His eyes were almost watery, since other than the teachings that the Irishman had given him, along with his friendship, this was the first real gift he had ever received from him. Thank you, Liam, he said. I will wear it with pride. Liam smirked. Oh, you better, lad. It is a symbol of bravery and honor. Azariah thought for a moment, and remembered what the Ogallala Lakota medicine man High Cloud told him about faith, honor, and even courage. He took what Liam said to heart, and immediately wrapped the grizzly bear claw necklace around his neck. Liam looked outside at the clouds. It was the middle of November, and the weather was getting colder by the minute. It wouldn't be long before winter came, and in the mountains, it could come unexpectedly. We better start packing up the clothes and getting ready for tomorrow, said Liam. Where are we going tomorrow? Asked Azariah. Liam gave a smile. The Wind River Mountains to find good trapping grounds for the spring trapping season, and to find White Antelopes village. Azariah was jumping like a kid in a candy store. Really? He shouted. We're going to find Sweetgrass's people. Jesus, lad, it's nothing to get excited about, laughed Liam. But yes, we are, and we're going to spend the winter with them. That is, if it's okay with the White Antelope. Azariah gave a loud whoop, because he was going to see Sweetgrass and maybe possibly ask her if she would be his wife. That is, if her father didn't scalp him first. You're really in love with that girl, aren't you? Asked Liam. Azariah turned red, almost embarrassed. But he nodded, She is all I think about, he said. I mean, there was nothing about her that makes me feel... I don't know what it is. Complete? The youth nodded. Liam gave a smile and turned his attention outside to the forest. At the entrance were the graves of his beloved Raincloud and infant daughter Constance. A sense of sadness came over him as he remembered the short, happy life he had with his young family before the Crow war party took them from him. He knew what the boy was feeling and almost envied him. "Oh, I know how you feel, lad," he said. "I know it all too well." A few weeks later, around the second week of December, the village of White Antelope was buzzing. Located in the southern range of the Wind River Mountains, everyone was getting on with their everyday life. Like their allies the Cheyenne and the Lakota, the Arapaho tribe had prepared well for the upcoming winter and stored enough food to prevent starvation. However, that didn't mean anyone was idle. Two Hawks had just successfully led a hunt for a herd of elk a couple of days previous, and many in the village were grateful for the extra meat, especially the elderly who could no longer hunt or care for themselves. Two Hawks and Howling Wolf graciously shared the spoils of the hunt with them. Warriors and hunters who were known for their selfless generosity were well respected, which was one of the reasons many of the younger men looked up to the Arapaho elder and sub-chief. White Antelope was chief of this village because he was a born leader, but he was also wise and a good judge of character, which is why he and Two Hawks were like brothers. They both were known to put the interests of the people before their own. It was during the cold afternoon that Sweetgrass decided to take a walk to the lake to fill her buffalo gourd for the elk stew dinner her mother was planning on making. It was at the lake where she heard a dog barking coming from the opposite side of the lake. When she looked up, that is when she saw them and gave a huge whoop. She recognized one of the riders coming around the lake following the dog. Azariah on his black stallion was riding as fast as he could, while pulling a string of pack horses with him. The faithful dog, Gideon, was running around beside his master, barking and yipping as if he were excited to be coming home. Liam, who was riding his brown pinto stallion and pulling his string of pack horses filled with an entire fall and winter season of beaver pelts, rode at a measured pace. Unlike his much younger protege and friend, he was in no rush to get to the village. But then again, he didn't have an Arapaho Juliet waiting on him, whom he saw running around the lake towards Azariah. The Irishman laughed when he saw Azariah pull his animals to a stop and jump off his horse to greet Sweetgrass. The girl jumped on the giant teenager, attempting to tackle him, but instead settled for a bear hug. When Liam caught up with the young lovebirds, he noticed Sweetgrass was smiling, but had tears in her eyes. "What the devil did you do, lad?" he asked. Azariah looked up and smiled at his friend and mentor. "I told her that I am going to ask her father for a hand in marriage," he said. "That is, if she welcomes me as a husband." Liam immediately looked at Sweetgrass and could tell by her expression that there was no question. She welcomed Azariah to be her husband. "Well, I would say congratulations, lad," said Liam. "But now you got to do the hard part first." "What would be?" "Getting her daddy to say yes," said Liam as he looked beyond the young couple and noticed that the villagers were approaching, led by Chief White Antelope, and none other than Two Hawks himself. "Ah, speak of the devil." Chapter 21. Later that evening in the lodge of Sweetgrass's family, Azariah, Liam, Two Hawks, and Howling Wolf had just finished eating their dinner. Claybasket and Sweetgrass sat in the background, finishing their dinners as well, as they listened intently for the discussion that was about to happen. Azariah and Sweetgrass had just announced their engagement to her parents. Two Hawks was the opposite of happy. While just arriving, Azariah had asked the elders' permission for her daughter's hand in marriage. Two Hawks didn't say no, but he didn't say yes either. Sensing the tension, White Antelope and Wandering Bear suddenly suggested to Two Hawks that maybe he and his family should eat first, before giving his answer to something as big and serious as marriage. Claybasket agreed, and managed to convince her husband that the chief and the medicine man were right. Azariah and Liam were invited and told that they would discuss Azariah and Sweetgrass after dinner. Liam thought it wise, and Azariah felt there was nothing wrong in waiting until after dinner, especially after seeing Two Hawks' expression when he told him about the recent engagement between himself and his daughter. Azariah felt that he was about to be led to the gallows, but at least once everyone had their bellies full, he could explain man to man to his future father-in-law of his commitment and undying love for his daughter. "So, you wish to marry my daughter?" asked Two Hawks. The man was straightforward and saw no reason to drag this out any longer, now that everyone had eaten their fill. Azariah nodded. Two Hawks paused for a second to turn to his wife and daughter. Seeing the concerned look on Claybasket, the Arapaho elder sensed that she shared his feelings on this subject. Sweethawk momentarily looked at her father and smiled before bowing her head. Two Hawks already knew what was on her mind, and it brought him very little comfort. He turned back to Azariah, who never took his eyes off the elder. "What do you have to offer for her hand?" asked Two Hawks. "The moment of truth," the youth thought to himself, before answering in the Arapaho tongue. "I have 3 fine horses, given to me by a great Cheyenne warrior and friend named Spotted Eagle." Two Hawks was unimpressed. "Why would a Cheyenne warrior give you 3 fine horses?" "I saved his eldest son's life from a rampaging buffalo," answered Azariah. "Aye, he who walks tall speaks with a straight tongue, Two Hawks," said Liam. "I know the Cheyenne warrior called Spotted Eagle personally, for he is a brother of my dead wife." Two Hawks and Howling Wolf were convinced, for they knew Liam O'Reilly would never lie, especially about something as serious as that. Knowing that, Two Hawks began to have second thoughts about Azariah, but only a little bit. "Two Hawks," said Azariah, "I know you don't trust me very much because I am a white man, and I for one do not blame you." At that statement, the elder raised an eyebrow, a sign that the giant white boy got his attention. "But I speak with a straight tongue when I say that I love your daughter, and I will do everything in my power to make her happy, as you love her mother, and would do and have done the same for her." A giggle from both Claybasket and Sweetgrass caught Two Hawks' attention. It was clear to him that his wife was impressed with Isaiah's flattery. "I believe you are a good man, he who walks tall," said Two Hawks. "But 3 horses are not enough." Temporarily dejected, Azariah quickly regained his composure. "Name your price, and I will gladly pay it." 10 horses for my daughter's hand," said Two Hawks. Azariah looked at Sweetgrass for a moment, ignoring the surprised look on Liam's face, then smiled. "Done," he said. "I will bring you 10 horses, plus the 3 that I already have to give." 13 horses, Two Hawks thought. "How generous." With that being said, Liam slowly moved to the youth's ear and whispered, "Just where are you going to get 10 horses? Azariah turned and asked, "Do you feel like going on a horse raiding expedition against the Crow?" The Irishman smiled. Azariah, with the help of Howling Wolf, Beaver, and Ottertail, along with Liam, was planning on leading a horse raiding expedition into Crow Country. But a blizzard invaded the valley and made traveling impossible. Considering that it was winter, no one was surprised, but that didn't help the situation for Azariah and Sweetgrass. Despite this, Liam and Wandering Bear cautioned patience, believing such a delay was a blessing in disguise since it gave the two more time to get to know each other and continue their courtship, under the watchful eye of Two Hawks, of course. Azariah was determined to prove that he would be a worthy husband to Sweetgrass and earn her parents' trust. He would sometimes get up early in the morning and help bring in firewood for Sweetgrass's family, or for some elder who needed some help around their lodge. He, along with Gideon, Beaver, and Ottertail, would go and check on the horses, and see that they were looked after during the cold winter months. Azariah would even feed Sweetgrass's horse, and the horses belonging to the rest of her family, just out of sheer courtesy. The blizzard only lasted a few days, and when it subsided, Azariah went to talk to Howling Wolf, Beaver, and Ottertail. "Now that the storm is gone, may I suggest we go hunting to bring in the meat before we pay the Crow a visit?" "Excellent suggestion, brother," said Howling Wolf. "Even though we still have enough meat for the village to last for the rest of winter, it never hurts to have extra." "I agree," said Ottertail. "I would rather be doing that than being stuck in the lodge all winter like some grizzly bear in hibernation." The foursome laughed as Liam, White Antelope, Two Hawks, and Wandering Bear approached them after exiting the main lodge that held the village council. Howling Wolf told them their plans, and when the older man offered to join them, none of the younger men objected. "Thank you greatly," said Azariah. "The more experienced men we have, the greater success the hunt will be." "Spoken like one of our people," said Wandering Bear with a smile. Two Hawks wasn't entirely impressed, considering that the whole plan was Azariah's idea, but he wasn't against it and was very pleased that his future son-in-law had the people's welfare at heart, and not for selfish reasons. By noon, all 8 men were on the trail. Despite his advanced age of 50 summers, Wandering Bear still had the vitality of a man 20 years younger. He was not only a holy man or village medicine man, but also their best tracker when it came to hunting game or the enemy. Beaver was Wandering Bear's pupil, and was learning how to become a tracker like the medicine man. Everything the elder did, the youth paid close attention to. They had recently found the tracks of a moose herd. It was too early for the mating season for the moose, so it was more likely a bull in his harem. The Arapaho holy man and his young apprentice counted at least 20 animals from the tracks, and they were very close. Using sign language, Wandering Bear informed White Antelope and the group before he and Beaver continued. Moose was the largest of the deer family in North America. The western moose the men were hunting was and still is considered the second largest of the subspecies, followed by the Alaskan moose, which is the largest. Up to 1,600 pounds. Females are shorter and smaller, standing up to 5 feet 6 inches at the shoulder, and weighing up to 800 pounds. Either way, with that many animals in the herd the men were hunting, that was a lot of meat, enough to last to the summer, let alone to the end of winter. When they caught up to them, Azariah was amazed at the size of even the females. Granted, they weren't as big as the buffalo, but the moose was a formidable animal and just as dangerous when cornered or provoked. It was clear to everyone in the group caution must be heeded. There were calves in the herd as well. Liam quietly counted at least 8 calves, 11 adult cows, and of course, there was the bull, the king of the forest and his harem. The Irishman almost snickered at the bull strutted along the perimeter, protecting his females and young like he was a cock of the walk. Liam had seen such behavior among his fellow men, both white and red alike, and would often wonder how mankind hadn't been wiped off the face of the earth already. Perhaps God does have a sense of humor, he thought. I think we should hunt the cows that don't have young, suggested Wandering Bear through sign. No one objected because the suggestion made a lot of sense. The village wasn't starving yet, so hunting cows with calves would be unnecessary. Under normal or extreme conditions, most men, both white and red alike, wouldn't discriminate between hunting a mother moose or calf. As the saying went in the mountains, meat is meat. Getting Azariah's attention, Beaver and Howling Wolf pointed to 2 adult cows that were by themselves. They were grazing closer to the hunters than the rest of the herd. The men considered this good fortune and were not about to throw away this opportunity. The 2 adult females seemed to be larger than average, weighing almost as much as the bull. Taking his Pennsylvania rifle, Azariah quickly aimed at the one closest to him and cocked the rifle. By the time the moose cow heard the click, it was too late. Azariah pulled the trigger and boom! She was dead before she even hit the ground. The second female, who was grazing with her, bolted, but not before Beaver put 2 arrows into her. Liam fired his Pennsylvania rifle into a third cow that was near the herd. She dropped in the middle of the run as the herd bolted. Beaver and Ottertail chased a second moose cow on their horses, and Ottertail managed to thrust his lance into the beast before she collapsed. By the time it was all over, there were 3 dead adult moose cows ready to be skinned, gutted, and over 2,400 pounds of meat to be transported back to the village on a travois. Today is a good day, said White Antelope as he, Liam, 2 Hawks, and Wandering Bear approached one of the carcasses. Howling Wolf was sent back to get the rest of the horses to start carrying the bounty, while the rest of the men quickly dismounted and started butchering their prize. Chapter 22. When the hunting party returned to the village, there was great excitement over the sight of what they brought home. It was clear to everyone how successful the hunt was by just looking at the large amounts of moose meat that was brought in on the travois. Azariah gave half of his share of meat to 2 Hawks and Howling Wolf. The rest he gave to the elderly, who were no longer able to hunt for their food. This act of generosity didn't go unnoticed, and was praised by Liam, White Antelope, and Wandering Bear. Even 2 Hawks was impressed and somehow mellowed a bit towards the young white boy. As Claybasket and Sweetgrass were preparing dinner, 2 Hawks pulled Azariah aside, wishing to speak to him privately. You have proven once again to be an honorable man, he who walks tall, he said. Thank you, 2 Hawks, responded Azariah. The elder and the youth decided to go for a walk near the lake. Azariah knew that his future father-in-law had something on his mind, but chose to let him break the ice. You understand my concern? Asked 2 Hawks. About me and your daughter? The elder nodded. Azariah sighed before continuing. I understand your concern, that you don't want your daughter to be married to a white man, and I do not blame you. 2 Hawks pondered for a moment. I want my daughter to be safe, he said, but I also want her to be happy. Azariah smiled at that. I pray that I am worthy to be the man to make her happy, he said. I have never been in love before, and I have prayed to God to help me not be a man who would cause pain to someone I love dearly. You speak as you are familiar with hurt when it comes to the heart, said Two Hawks. It was clear that the elder hit the nail on the head with that statement. I know what it is like to have someone inflict pain on someone you love dearly. This got Two Hawks' attention. Tell me more, he said. Azariah told about what happened to his twin sister in exacting revenge against the man who caused her great pain. He told about why he was forced to leave his family and flee out west. He explained that meeting Liam O'Reilly and learning from him was a lifesaver, probably the best thing to ever happen to him since he was forced to leave his home. That was until he met Sweetgrass. So you'll understand that I wouldn't, or couldn't, intentionally, cause Sweetgrass any kind of pain or dishonor her in any way, because I know what it is like to have that happen. Grunted Two Hawks. I am glad you told me this. Two Hawks gently put his arm across Azariah's shoulder as they continued to walk. Do you miss your family? Very much so, answered Azariah, but I could only pray and hope that God has him in his high hands. You speak very highly about your God, said Two Hawks with a sense of curiosity. The one you call Jesus Christ. My father is a holy man, like Wandering Bear, said Azariah. He believes that the one we call Jesus Christ created the earth in 6 days and rested on the 7th, that all of mankind are descendants of the first man and woman. Two Hawks thought for a moment as he pondered what the youth just told him about his religious beliefs. We have a similar belief in a way, he said. We believe we are all created equal by the man above, and that we are all related. Raging Bull told me about that, said Azariah. He mentioned that the Cheyenne and Lakota practice the same belief too. And you? Asked Two Hawks. What do you believe in? Azariah pondered that question for a moment before answering. I know I haven't been here long, but from what I have learned, I believe that who I call Jesus Christ and who you call the man above are the same. The Arapaho elder raised an eyebrow as if very interested in Azariah's reasoning. Don't ask me how, but I find there are more similarities between our religious beliefs than there are differences, said Azariah. It goes to show that your people and my people have a lot more in common than we are willing to admit. I cannot argue with that, said Two Hawks. However, I think the only difference is that the Arapahos, or even most of the tribes that I have come in contact with, they don't judge a man by his skin color, unlike my people do, said Azariah. Two Hawks smirked and said, No, that I strongly will not argue with. With that, Azariah laughed as he realized that he and his future father-in-law somehow managed to come to common ground, and even friendship developed as he walked back to the village. On their way back is when they noticed something in the forest. A slight movement appeared to be a man crawling towards them. Two Hawks and Azariah, both armed, went to investigate, and as they approached, their suspicions were correct. It was a man, but a white man, half frozen and looked like he hadn't eaten in a while. Help me, said the stranger. His voice was weak, and he wore a grizzly beard hide. His hair was long and black as well as his beard, which was covered in snow and frost from bottom to top. Stay here with him while I bring help, said Two Hawks. Azariah stayed with the stranger, but something did not feel right, as if a sixth sense was telling Azariah that it would be best to leave this man to the wolves. But at the same time, his Christian upbringing couldn't allow him to abandon someone in need. Either way, the youth gently lifted the stranger and gave him a piece of beef jerky and some water, until Two Hawks returned. What is your name, sir? Asked Azariah. The stranger looked up at the youth and weakly answered, Manson. John Manson. Help is on the way, John, said Azariah. You're among friends. Little did he know that at that moment, Azariah would come to regret that and realize that his sixth sense had been correct. Chapter 23. They were able to bring the half-frozen stranger called John Manson to the village. Wandering Bear's daughter, Black Shawl, was an expert healer and mixed some herbs in boiling water that would warm the newcomer slowly but surely. Her 10-year-old daughter, Laughing Bird, and her husband, Nightwing, managed to cover the newcomer with 2 or 3 buffalo robes to warm him up, as she and her father tried to get the healing herbal tea into the man. Word reached Liam O'Reilly and White Antelope that Azariah and Two Hawks brought in the stranger, who was now at the lodge of Nightwing and Black Shawl. They came to the lodge, followed by Claybasket, Howling Wolf, Sweetgrass, Ottertail, and Beaver, and some other members of the head council. "Why brought in a stray home lad?" asked Liam. "How bad is he?" The youth just shrugged. He was nearly half frozen from the looks of it, plus he looks like he had not eaten in days. Liam thought for a moment. "What did you say his name was?" "He said his name was Manson," answered Azariah. "John Manson." "Something bothering you, lad?" asked Liam. Azariah wasn't sure what was bothering him, but he felt an instinct in his gut that saving the stranger's life was a mistake. "You know of a trapper or anyone by the name of John Manson?" "Oh, I can't say that I do," answered Liam. "What are your thoughts, he who walks tall?" asked Two Hawks in Arapaho. "I am not sure," answered Azariah in the same tongue. "I have a bad feeling about the stranger." Azariah's statement caught everyone's attention. "Do you believe you shouldn't have brought him to our village?" asked White Antelope. The youth nodded. "I can't say why, and almost feel ashamed for even thinking it, since none of us know this man." "It is never wrong to be cautious, he who walks tall," said Two Hawks. "A man has to know his own mind and trust his own instincts." "In other words, lad," added Liam, "you just listen to what your God tells you." Azariah took the advice to heart. Nightwing and Laughing Bird exited the lodge and announced that the man called John Manson was resting. Wandering Bear and Black Shawl were with him and checking on his progress. With that, White Antelope suggested the crowd disperse and leave the medicine man and his daughter to their work. Azariah filed his suspicions about John Manson in the back of his mind. The fact that he and Two Hawks had come to an understanding, and that the elder had now accepted him as a future son-in-law, brought the giant youth great joy. He and Sweetgrass continued their courtship this time without supervision, which made everything a whole lot easier. It was the beginning of the new year in the second week of January. Azariah, now 15, was anxious about his upcoming wedding. He told his plans of the horse raiding expedition against the Crow to Liam, Two Hawks, Howling Wolf, Beaver, and Ottertail. He thought doing it in the middle of winter was sound because most tribes of the plains do not raid each other in the wintertime. No one, not even Two Hawks, argued against it. It was just the opposite. The Crow would never suspect it, not during the middle of winter. However, something else was making the youth anxious. John Manson had recovered quickly from his ordeal. He told Liam and Azariah that he was a free trapper like themselves, and that he used to work for the American Fur Company back east near Lake Michigan. He had come west for better trapping grounds and more freedom about 4 years ago. Azariah suspected that there was more to the story than what Manson was letting on. Liam, Two Hawks, Sweetgrass, and Howling Wolf shared his suspicions, yet nobody had any proof that the newcomer was dangerous or had ill intentions. During the next few weeks, he helped with the hunting and even helped Wandering Bear's family with their chores around their lodge and often volunteered to help keep watch of the horses against horse thieves from enemy tribes. Manson wasn't a talkative person. He was 6'2", weighed about 200 pounds or less, had brown hair and brown eyes, and appeared to be in his late 30s. Liam and Azariah noticed a southern accent, so even though they didn't ask where he was from, they suspected that he was from the deep south. Azariah learned during his short time in the West that there was an unwritten rule among trappers: mind your own business. Still, Azariah's bad feeling about Manson wouldn't go away, and he prayed that he was wrong about him. He shared these feelings with Sweetgrass, and she mentioned that she, too, didn't trust the newcomer.
"I don't like the way he looks at some of the girls here,"
she said. That statement took Azariah off guard. "What do you mean, the girls?"
"The young girls, about Laughing Girl's age."
Azariah started to get concerned. "Have you told your father this, or White Antelope?" Sweetgrass slowly shook her head.
"I see how he looks at Laughing Bird," she said. "He's very subtle about it so that no one will notice it."
"You did, obviously," said Azariah. "We better tell Wandering Bear and Nightwing at least."
"I agree."
Later that day, they found Wandering Bear by Chief White Antelope's lodge, talking with the leader, along with Liam and Two Hawks. They expressed their concerns about John Manson and were surprised to know that the medicine man shared their distrust of the trapper as well. However, he admitted that he didn't notice the trapper's subtle, lustful looks towards his daughter. "Right, it's not my place to say this," said Liam in his Arapaho tongue, "but I believe the man has overstayed his welcome." Two Hawks agreed. "If what my daughter and he who walks tall says are true, then it is time for him to leave." "But he hasn't done anything," said White Antelope. "Not yet, at least." If I may speak, Chief White Antelope, asked Azariah. The chief gave the youth permission to speak. I believe he should leave before he does do something wrong, said Azariah. From what Sweetgrass just told me, this man is dangerous, especially around little girls. He may not show it and is very crafty and subtle about it, which makes him even more dangerous, and that is what worries me. From the expression on the youth's face, Wandering Bear suspected that there was more to the reasoning that led to Azariah's worries. You have known men like him before, he who walks tall. Unfortunately, I have, said Azariah. My twin sister was raped by men like him. That was all the medicine man needed to hear, and he headed back towards his lodge to talk to his daughter and son-in-law about their guest. I hope I'm wrong about this, Azariah said. Liam, Two Hawks, Chief White Antelope, and Sweetgrass nodded in agreement, but all of them knew that Azariah probably was not wrong. Chapter 24. By the time Wandering Bear returned to his lodge, he found his granddaughter, Laughing-Bird, weeping, while Blackshaw tried to comfort her. What has happened? He asked. Blackshaw was hesitant to tell her father, but managed to find the strength.
The white man, Manson,
was all she said. Wandering Bear fell to his knees and gently put his hands on his granddaughter's shoulders. Did he touch you? Laughing-Bird just nodded. Tell me more, granddaughter, he said. Do not be afraid.
I was playing down by the lake near the horses, said Laughing-Bird. He said that he saw a pretty butterfly and wanted to show me near the bushes, and that is when he grabbed and hurt me.
Did you try to scream? Asked Wandering Bear.
He said he would kill me and my parents and you if I tried to scream or if I told anyone, answered Laughing-Bird.
It took all the self-control that Wandering Bear had to keep his rage in check. Have you told Nightwing? He asked his daughter.
Not yet.
Tell him when he returns from his hunt, then have him meet me at Two Hawks' lodge. When word of what John Manson did to little Laughing-Bird spread around the entire village, everyone's bloodlust was up, but no more than Nightwing and Wandering Bear. However, before they could get their hands on the child molester, John Manson managed to escape by stealing one of the horses from the herd. Standing before the council, Nightwing was planning on getting a revenge party together to hunt down the rapist, when Azariah entered and volunteered to go with him. This is my fault, Nightwing, he said. I suspected Manson's treachery from the beginning, and I brought him among your people when I should have left him to die where I found him. Nightwing was enraged, but he didn't blame Azariah, nor Two Hawks, for that matter, since the elder was with the youth when they found John Manson, brought him in, and helped nurse him back to health. What's done is done, he who walks tall, he said. No one could have honestly known what the man would do, but what matters now is that he pays for what he has done. I agree, said Liam O'Reilly, who also volunteered his services to hunt down John Manson. He couldn't have gotten far, considering there's still snow on the ground, and from what I saw from the clouds today, another snowstorm is coming, and soon. Then we have little time to waste, said Wandering Bear. It took the revenge party no less than half an hour to get ready. Azariah had Gideon sniff out Manson's trail. That gave him an advantage over the fugitive. Before riding out of the village, Liam strode over to Azariah to reassure him. This isn't your fault, lad, he said. As Nightwing said, no one could have known what the sick bastard was planning. Azariah turned and gave his mentor a look that the Irishman had seen among men who were on a mission for blood. Tell that to Nightwing's daughter. Gideon picked up the scent and led the hunting party towards John Manson. The rapist had at least a 2-hour head start, but still couldn't get very far in knee-deep snow. He suspected that Laughing-Bird had told her parents what he did to her, and he was not under any delusions of what fate had in store for him if the Arapahoes caught up to him. Fortunately for him, he still had his own Pennsylvania rifle and powder horn. Manson figured that if he couldn't outrun them, he could find a good lookout spot and cut down the odds in his favor a bit. He managed to find high ground in a cave. Good place to make a stand, he thought. John Manson was never a man who thought things through before doing things, good or bad. After raping his 12-year-old niece over a decade ago, the illegitimate son of a plantation owner was forced to flee his Columbia, South Carolina home, rather than face the wrath of his half-brother. Not that he cared much about his family or anyone else other than himself. His father didn't give him much love, since he was the offspring of a fling between his filthy father and the town's pastor's wayward daughter. His stepmother and older half-siblings were worse. Even though his father claimed him, that was all he would do for him and left him with nothing in his will. When his eldest half-brother offered to hire him as an overseer on the plantation, deep down John Manson felt insulted, and believed he deserved more than that. A lot more. Violating his niece was the ultimate revenge not just for his half-brother, but against his whole family for the mistreatment against him his entire life. Since then, John Manson had walked that road as if he were entitled to anything and everything, and nobody better get in his way. Even when he signed on to trap for the American Fur Company, he raised a lot of hell in the Lake Michigan region after he assaulted 2 American Indian girls. His employers felt that he was a liability, so they offered to surrender him to the tribe of the 2 victims. But he escaped justice again and found himself in St. Louis, where he joined a group of successful French trappers. However, his pompous attitude got him in trouble with them, and they abandoned him near Independence Rock with no horse. He walked and crawled until his body damn near gave out on him, and it was near the village of White Antelope in the Wind River Mountains that Azariah Hancock and 2 Hawks found him. Unsurprisingly, John Manson shared the view of most whites that Indians were inferior, but he wasn't a complete idiot. He knew or suspected that the giant white teenager and his dumb Irish prick of a mentor didn't trust him. Not that he cared anyway. He wouldn't have been surprised if they were among the hunting party trailing him to either kill him or bring him back to face justice. "The joke is on you," he silently said to himself. "Damned Injun lovers." He was waiting patiently from his hideout, already decided that if Hancock and the Irishmen were with their Injun friends, he would take them out first. "He is close," said Azariah. "How do you know, lad?" asked Liam. The youth pointed to Gideon, who had stopped and gave a low growl. Liam knew that their quarry was close. He was just testing his friend and protege. Nightwing, Wandering Bear, and 2 Hawks also knew that John Manson was close, and suspected that he was planning an ambush of some sort. "His tracks lead that way," said Liam in the Arapaho tongue. "It appears he has the high ground and can pick us off one by one." "You have a plan, Raging Bull?" asked Nightwing. Liam nodded. "I think it is best if we split up, and since there are 10 of us, we should do it in 3 groups. Nightwing and 2 Hawks decided to ride with Azariah, while Wandering Bear and Howling Wolf rode with Liam. The last 4 warriors were Beaver, Ottertail, and 2 named Red Lance and Elkhorn. The men doubled back on their tracks and managed to circle their quarry in different directions. Nightwing, 2 Hawks, and Azariah went north. Wandering Bear, Howling Wolf, and Liam went south, and the rest of the men took a western route to surprise the fugitive. It was agreed by everyone that John Manson was to be taken alive if possible, and brought back to the village to face justice for what he has done. However, that didn't mean Nightwing liked it, for he wanted to kill the sick bastard for raping his daughter, and he wasn't alone in that thinking. Feeling completely responsible for saving John Manson's life and bringing him into their village, Azariah wanted to skin the rapist alive. The youth also had a personal reason for wanting to kill John Manson, a reason that 2 Hawks would only guess by his expression. Azariah was thinking of his twin sister, Abigail, and what was done to her. John Manson's sick treachery brought back the painful memory, and it was too much for the giant youth to handle. Gideon gave another low growl as a signal to his master that they were close. Azariah patted the dog on his head and signaled to 2 Hawks that he should stay behind with the animal, while Nightwing and he climbed up the cliff to have a look-see. The elder did not object, but reminded the 2 that Manson was to be brought back alive. Both men nodded before moving on. Azariah checked his Pennsylvania rifle and 2 pistols to see if they were loaded and primed. Nightwing had his bow and arrows, along with 2 scalping knives and a tomahawk ready. When they reached their objective, they found their prey, who was waiting from his hiding place, prepared to set up his ambush. Little did he know that at least 2 of his pursuers were right behind him, actually right above him, ready to pounce. The sound of Azariah's rifle being cocked got John Manson's attention, but too late. "Drop your weapons, you sick bastard!" shouted Azariah as he aimed his rifle at the fugitive. "Or so help me God, you will find yourself in hell real quick." Realizing he was outgunned, the fugitive tried to buy some time. "You wouldn't shoot a fellow white man in the back." Despite the fact that he had just turned 15 years old a couple of weeks prior, Azariah was not a fool nor naive. "In a heartbeat." "I can't believe you would turn in a white man to these heathens," said Manson, "and over a stinking squaw." Noticing the rapist trying to sneak out a pistol while dropping his rifle, Azariah shot him at his left ankle without hesitation. John Manson howled in pain as Nightwing pounced on him in time to put a knife to his throat. Manson could see the rage in the man's eyes and also noticed that the warrior was using all the self-control he had to keep from cutting his throat. Azariah immediately jumped down and was standing right beside Nightwing as he pulled out 1 pistol and pointed it at John Manson's temple. "Please give us an excuse," he said with venom. Realizing he was in a no-win situation, John Manson surrendered. Nightwing took all his weapons and made sure he was completely unarmed. Azariah fired one of his pistols in the air and signaled to the rest of the hunting party that they got their quarry. Suddenly, Gideon showed up with 2 hawks and managed to come between his master and John Manson, growling at the latter. "Gideon," said Azariah, "he makes a move, rip his throat out." For the first time, John Manson was terrified, and it showed when he quickly pissed himself. When Liam and the rest of the party showed up and gathered around John Manson, they had him stripped butt naked and tied his hands behind his back. He demanded that his wound be tended to, but the Irishman gave him a smirk and said, "Your ankle wound is the least of our problems now. Pretty soon it won't even matter." "Piss on you, you dumb potato-eating Mick," responded Manson, trying to show some bravado. Liam responded with a quick right hook to the man's jaw, knocking him senseless. "You know, I see no reason why you can't deliver justice right here and now," said Liam to Nightwing and Wandering Bear. "It was your daughter and granddaughter that he violated." "As much as I want to kill him right now, Raging Bull," said Nightwing, "it would be too good for him and merciful compared to what our women will do to him." "I agree," said Wandering Bear. "What we could do to him cannot compare." "As long as I get to watch," added Azariah. Nightwing and some of the warriors looked at the youth with a little surprise. However, 2 hawks, Liam and Wandering Bear, understood his anger, for they knew about what happened to his sister, and guessed that what John Manson did to Laughing Bird brought back the painful memory. A couple of hours later, they returned to the village with their prisoner. John Manson was gagged by Azariah to keep him from hurling insults at everyone. Nightwing took the prisoner by the rawhide rope tied around his neck and dragged him over to the center of the village, where he was staked down, spread-eagled. As soon as the gag was removed, Manson continued to spit out insults and curses, mostly toward Azariah and Liam, for selling out of white men to these heathens. This was more than Azariah could tolerate. "You don't get it, do you?" he asked the condemned prisoner. "You raped a child, a 10-year-old girl!" John Manson scoffed. "She was woman enough for me. Besides, she was only a dirty Injun brat." Suddenly, Azariah gave out a huge roar that would have done justice to an angry she-grizzly, and immediately took out his Arkansas toothpick, grabbed John Manson by the balls, and with one swipe, castrated the sick bastard. The doomed rapist screamed like a banshee, and would have continued to do so, had not Azariah shoved the man's severed shaft and testicles down his throat. Azariah was about to do more, but Liam and Wandering Bear quickly pulled him away from John Manson. "You have done enough, lad," said Liam. "Let the women do the rest." Azariah tried to fight his mentor, but calmed himself down when Sweetgrass stood in front of him and touched his cheek. Like an iceberg cooling down an erupting volcano, Azariah allowed himself to be guided to the lake by his love to help wash the blood from his hands. As this was going on, the women of the village of White Antelope, led by Black Shawl, were delivering justice to John Manson, who screamed in extreme agony as they skinned him alive. Chapter 25. The next couple of days were not easy for Azariah Hancock. After justice was delivered to the vile John Manson, the expected snowstorm came to the valley. With her parents' permission, Sweetgrass invited Azariah to stay with her family, for which the youth was grateful and enjoyed her company. Despite that he was an honorable and grateful host, it was hard for him to sleep at night since John Manson's heinous crime against poor Laughing Bird. Memories of his sister's attack plagued Azariah at night, and he would wake up in a cold sweat, and sometimes walk down to the lake, when the weather permitted, in the middle of the night to weep. Sweetgrass was some comfort, but Azariah was racked with guilt, feeling that he failed to protect his sister, and now he blamed himself for what happened to Laughing Bird. A week later, during a chilly morning, Azariah visited Wandering Bear's family. After knocking on the flap of the medicine man's lodge, he waited until it was open and Wandering Bear poked out his head. "Come in, he who walks tall," he said. "Please do come in." The youth slowly entered and quickly noticed that Black Shawl, Nightwing, and Laughing Bird were present as well. He immediately avoided looking at them, hanging his head in shame. The family quickly noticed the expression as Wandering Bear directed the youth to sit. "What troubles you, he who walks tall?" Azariah suddenly looked up with tears in his eyes towards the Nightwing and Black Shawl, then towards their little girl. "I am truly sorry for what that man did to Laughing Bird," he said in Arapaho. "I am to blame for it, Azariah then slowly took out his knife and handed it to Nightwing. Your daughter would have never been violated had I not brought her attacker into your village. I too should be punished for what he did to her. Before Nightwing could react, Blackshaw took the knife from her husband and gave it back to Azariah before speaking. You are innocent of this, he who walks tall. No one could have known what was in that man's heart. What's done is done, and he paid with his life for his crime against my daughter. It was you who helped us capture him and brought him back to face justice, added Nightwing. This is not on you. It was him and him alone. Wandering Bear suddenly placed a hand on Azariah's shoulder. Tell them about your sister. Azariah explained what happened to his sister and why he was forced to leave his home after he took vengeance on the man who raped her. I could not protect myself or save my sister, and now my own stupidity has caused you and your family great pain. As Azariah buried his head in his hands, weeping, Blackshaw suddenly wrapped her arms around him in comfort. Then the laughing bird walked up to him and hugged him as well. Don't cry, he who walks tall. Please don't cry. Azariah looked into the Arapaho child's eyes and saw something he didn't expect. He saw not only forgiveness, but strength. More strength than most girls her age, especially after what she just went through. She gently touched his cheek to wipe away his tears and gave a slight smile. He returned the smile and gently stroked her head. There is nothing for you to be sorry about, said Blackshaw. You should not be angry with yourself for what happened to your sister or my daughter, for you are not responsible for what was done to them. The men responsible for the pain they caused have paid for it, said Nightwing. Take comfort in that. Also take comfort that my granddaughter and your sister still live, said Wandering Bear. Blackshaw tried to give Azariah his knife back, but he kindly refused it. Keep it, he said, for Laughing Bird. She will need it more than me. He suddenly turned to Laughing Bird and pointed to the knife. Learn how to use that and use it well, so that no one will ever attempt to force themselves on you again. The child nodded, as her parents beamed with pride. Now that we have that out of the way, said Wandering Bear, don't you have a horse raiding expedition to plan against our crow enemies? For the first time, Azariah smiled, while everybody laughed. Chapter 26. It was the end of February. It would be a few weeks before spring would begin, but the winter of 1821 was still mild in the Rockies, and at least for a lovesick Azariah Hancock, it was a good day to visit the Crow and capture some crow horses. Accompanying him were Howling Wolf, Beaver, Ottertail, Nightwing, and of course Liam O'Reilly. Horse raiding, like hunting buffalo on a surround, was a serious and dangerous business. Since the Crow and the Arapaho were mortal enemies since time began, it was likely this expedition would end in bloodshed. Even in the most successful horse raids, it was rare that one ended without somebody losing their life or scalp. What made this raid so rare was that it was being done during the winter. Most horse raiding expeditions against enemy tribes took place between late spring to late summer, and sometimes early fall. Azariah knew this, but thought it would be a perfect and calculated opportunity that the Crow would never expect or see coming. However, he was far from naive. Liam and Nightwing strongly advised him not to underestimate the Crow, for they were not fools either. No tribe was better at stealing or capturing horses from enemies or trappers, or even their friends, than the proud members of the Crow Nation. Called the Upsaluga, which means crow or children of the large-beaked bird in their native tongue, they were historically known to be the practical jokers of the Northern Plains and Northern Rockies. Once established in the valley of the Yellowstone River and its tributaries on the Northern Plains, in what is now known as the states of Montana and Wyoming, the Crow divided into 4 groups: the Mountain Crow, River Crow, Kicked in the Bellies, and Beaver Dries its Fur. Formerly semi-nomadic hunters and farmers in the northeastern woodland, they adapted to the nomadic lifestyle of the Plains Indians as hunters and gatherers and hunted bison. Before 1700, they were using dog travail for carrying goods, but from about 1740, the Plains tribe quickly adopted the horse, which allowed them to move out onto the plain and hunt more effectively. However, the severe winters in the north kept their herds smaller than those of Plains tribes in the south. The Crow, along with their cousins the Hidatsa, Eastern Shoshone, and Northern Shoshone, soon became noted as horse breeders and dealers, and developed relatively large horse herds. At the time, other eastern and northern tribes were also moving on to the plains in search of a game for the fur trade, bison, and more horses. The Crow were subject to raids and horse thefts by horse-poor tribes, including the powerful Blackfoot Confederacy and their allies. Later they had to face the Lakota and their allies, the Arapaho and Cheyenne, who also stole horses from their enemies. Their greatest enemies became the tribes of the Blackfoot Confederacy and the Lakota Cheyenne-Arapaho Alliance. However, the Crow were generally friendly with the Northern Plains tribes of the Flathead, although sometimes they had conflicts. Nez Perces, Kootenai, Shoshone, Kiowa, and Kiowa Apache, as well as most trappers of the fur trade. The reason why Liam O'Reilly and some trappers like him had a grudge against the Crow was mainly that they ended up marrying into enemy tribes and learned that if you marry into a tribe, their allies become your allies, and their enemies become your enemies. Despite this, some trappers managed to live peacefully between enemy tribes, but that was rare. Azariah would always listen and take any advice that his mentor and Nightwing gave him and absorb it. He wanted this horse raiding expedition to not only be successful. After all, the whole purpose was to get 10 horses as a bride price for Sweetgrass, but he had hoped that it could and would be done without bloodshed. He mentioned that to Liam, to which the Irishman responded, "Do you believe such a thing is possible?" The youth just shrugged. "A man can hope, but anything is possible." Liam cackled. "Touché." It would take at least a couple of days to a week to reach Crow Country, especially the Yellowstone region. Azariah was not taking any chances. The weather continued to be agreeable, but the giant youth learned during a short time that Mother Nature was 100% unpredictable, and just as lethal as any warrior from an enemy tribe or a deadly grizzly bear. Despite that, their travel was uneventful. It was agreed that hunting for meat while going into Crow Country would be done with bows and arrows instead of firearms, to not attract unwanted attention. Beaver and Ottertail had taught Azariah how to use the bow and arrow. Like everything else he learned, Azariah became an adept student. The 4th day after leaving their village, Azariah and Beaver managed to bring down a yearling mule deer. They had plenty of pemmican and beef jerky, but that would be saved for later, once they got closer to enemy territory. The mule deer was a welcome sight, and nothing was put to waste as they dried the meat and pummeled what would not be eaten that night into beef jerky and pemmican. By the time they reached the Yellowstone River, they no longer would have fire in their camp at night. Caution and wits were the key to making this mission a success, and be able to make it back home alive. Although it was colder at night than during the day, the winter weather was still mild, and everyone's spirits were high. Early one morning, Howling Wolf and Ottertail decided to scout ahead, to see if there were any Crow villages nearby. Nightwing told them to be extra careful and not be gone too long. They assured him that all would be well, and they would return before nightfall, but the experienced warrior knew the pride of young people. A couple of years younger than Liam, Nightwing had often thought back to when he was those boys' age, and he was always making rash decisions to try and make a name for himself. He didn't expect Howling Wolf, Ottertail, or even Azariah to be any different. "I worry about our youth today," he said while getting ready to be on the move again. "Oh, what do you mean?" asked Liam. The warrior just sighed before he answered. "I remember when I was their age, so full of vim and vigor." "Oh, you left out arrogance, me friend," teased the Irishman. Nightwing chuckled. "That too." Both men glanced at Azariah and Beaver for a moment. The boys had just finished rubbing down the horses and getting them ready to travel, once Howling Wolf and Ottertail came back from their scouting mission. "He who walks tall is a good man," said Nightwing. "He has the maturity of men much older than himself." "Why, he's been through a lot," added Liam. "He has seen and done things that no boy his age should ever have to do or see." Nightwing grunted in agreement. "Same could be said for Ottertail," said the warrior. "But I find myself worrying about he who walks tall more than most of the boys of my people." The statement caught Liam's attention. "Why, is it because he is white and not of the people?" Nightwing nodded. "Don't be mistaken, Raging Bull. He who walks tall is a good man. I worry for him, not because of him." "Why, because of what happened to Laughing Bird and his own pain," said Liam. Nightwing knew that was a statement and not a question. "His past haunts him," he said. "Telling him he is not responsible for that or for what happened to my daughter will not change it." "I never really thought of that," said Liam. "I'm surprised you didn't, my friend," responded Nightwing. "I heard how you got the name Raging Bull." Liam glanced back at Azariah for a moment and thought about what Nightwing just said. "Oh, I see your point," he said. "What the Crow did to my family turned me into someone or something that I didn't want to become." The Irishman paused for a moment before asking Nightwing, "Do you think the same is happening to he who walks tall?" "I don't think so," said Nightwing. "I know it. Well, you know how much he wanted to avenge your daughter's rape, said Liam. I don't see that as a bad thing, though. Maybe it is bad, maybe not, said Nightwing. But you and I have seen the ugliness of vengeance, and what it does to a man's soul. Liam nodded. He wasn't fully convinced that Azariah could be affected by such emotion, but then again, he remembered his pain and what vengeance and guilt did to him. Each man has to walk his own path, he said to Nightwing. He who walks tall is no different. Why did the Lakota medicine man Highcloud give him that name? Asked Nightwing. He said he saw him in a vision many years ago, answered Liam. Said that Wakantanka had chosen a path for him to take, and that if he chose that path he would not walk it alone. Nightwing was surprised. Not walk it alone? Then the warrior's eyes widened. You mean Sweetgrass? I am not sure, my friend, said Liam, but all signs are pointing to her in walking that same path with he who walks tall. Now Nightwing glanced at Azariah, who along with Beaver was having coffee. The warrior smiled. She could do much worse than him. Chapter 27. Howling Wolf and Ottertail returned from their scouting mission later that afternoon, and reported that there was a crow village at least 10 miles or more from where they were camping. Nightwing and Liam felt this was good information, and suggested they wait until nightfall to visit their enemies. Azariah, who planned this expedition, immediately agreed and had everyone pack up and head towards the village. But they would wait until nightfall to steal the crow horses from the village herd. About 2 miles out of the crow village, it was 3 hours after sunset. Azariah went to a secluded spot to be alone and pray, as Liam and the rest of the raiding party were getting ready. Lord, it has been a while since we talked, said Azariah. First, I want to thank you for bringing me this far and protecting me. I want to thank you for new friends and for protecting them. Lord, if Sweetgrass is one that you would have me marry, Lord, then please give me a sign and let your will be done. As soon as he said that question, a wolf howled at the moon from a mountain peak. Azariah smiled and said, I assumed that was your answer, Lord. Thank you, and amen. The crow village that Azariah and the Arapaho warriors came upon was called Kicked in the Bellies. Liam suggested using knives to cut the ropes that held the herd together, and if necessary, the throats of the crow to keep them from sounding the alarm and alerting the rest of the village. Around midnight, the men slowly and quietly walked to the horse herd. Azariah and Howling Wolf volunteered to go first. Like stalking panthers, they slowly sneaked into the herd without spooking the horses. Armed with clubs, Beaver and Ottertail came from the opposite direction and surprised 2 crow guards, before dispatching them with their weapons. The 2 young warriors showed that there was no love lost for their enemy, and they quietly cut the throats of the crow guards and took their scalps, before sneaking into the horse herd themselves to join Azariah and Howling Wolf. Liam and Nightwing stayed in the shadows to keep a lookout. One of the boys managed to hop on a crow horse. They were to shout at the top of their lungs, and that would stampede the herd. Liam and Nightwing would cover their escape from the shadows, buying them time. At that exact moment, Azariah hopped on one horse bareback, followed by Howling Wolf, Beaver, and Ottertail. All 4 young men suddenly gave a loud yipping, which caused the herd to start stamping into a southeasterly direction away from the village. The plan had worked. The village had awakened, but the crow guards who were not killed by the intruders were completely caught off guard. Azariah and Howling Wolf led the way, as Liam and Nightwing covered their back trail. 4 crow warriors, who saw the intruders fleeing with their herd, were cut down by rifle shots from the Irishman's gun and arrows from Nightwing's bow. In their futile attempt to stop the intruders and reclaim the herd, Liam and Nightwing managed to escape and rejoin their friends during the chaos. About a week and a day later, the horse raiding party returned triumphantly to the Arapaho village of White Antelope. Beaver and Ottertail were each holding up a crow scalp and praising Azariah and Howling Wolf, who both planned out the raid, for great success and the fact that no lives other than that of the enemy were lost. White Antelope, 2 Hawks, and the rest of the council, as well as many warriors and families of Beaver and Ottertail, beamed with pride for the coup the 2 young men counted on their enemies, and cheered for Azariah and Howling Wolf for executing a successful horse raid. Feeling that too much credit was heaped upon themselves, Azariah and Howling Wolf both said that the plan couldn't have worked if it weren't for Nightwing and Raging Bull, as well as Beaver and Ottertail. Liam and Nightwing, who had been on horse raids before, were both gracious and humble in the praise, but told the council that the young men deserved full credit, since this was their first horse raiding expedition. Howling Wolf took it a step further when he said that the real credit should go to the man above. No one disagreed with him on that one. Two Hawks inspected the herd and was amazed at how large it was. As soon as we were safe from the Crow village, said Azariah, we counted at least 110 horses, but we lost about 20 2 days ago. Still, said Two Hawks, bringing in 90 horses is quite an accomplishment. 10 of these are yours, Two Hawks, said Azariah, plus the 3 that I have already given you. We have done nothing to deserve such generosity, said Beaver. I disagree, said Azariah. I could never have accomplished this on my own. Plus, I consider you all not just my friends, but family. A wise man told me once that a man's true heart is judged by how he looks after his family. Sound advice, said Wandering Bear. Who was this wise man that taught you to think and behave in such a way? Azariah beamed with pride as he answered, My father. At that exact moment, Sweetgrass appeared from behind her mother, followed by Gideon. At the mere sight of her, Azariah jumped off his horse and ran to her, picking her up in a bear hug as he kissed her. She returned his affection with a loving embrace of her own and returned to kiss as well. Everyone cheered the couple, except Two Hawks and Claybasket, who were both trying to get the two lovebirds' attention by clearing their throats, to remind them that such public displays of affection were considered taboo among the people. It was clear to everyone that such attempts were futile. As the two continued to kiss and embrace, the people continued to cheer, and Gideon howled in approval. Chapter 28. It was March of 1822. Azariah Hancock, his pregnant wife Sweetgrass, their dog Gideon, and Liam O'Reilly had just returned to the Arapaho village of White Antelope in the Wind River Mountains 2 weeks prior. Outside the lodge of his in-laws, the now 16-year-old mountain man known as He Who Walks Tall was pacing back and forth and sweating like a pig, while his beloved wife was in labor. Will you stop doing that? Shouted Liam. Jesus, Mary's mother and Joseph, you're the one that's about to become a father, but you're making me nervous. I'm just scared, that's all, said Azariah. Two Hawks, Howling Wolf, Wandering Bear, and Nightwing just chuckled at him. They were there for support, while their women were with Sweetgrass inside, helping her bring in the new life. In all my years, said Wandering Bear, I have never seen a man as nervous about fatherhood as you are, He Who Walks Tall. Can you blame him? Said Two Hawks. The first time is always the scariest. Having the baby is not what worries me, said Azariah in the Arapaho tongue. I want everything to be all right. I want Sweetgrass and the baby to both be healthy and well when it is said and done. Have faith, my brother, said Howling Wolf. My sister and the baby that is coming will be fine. You can't tell this fool to have faith, chuckled Liam. Ever since Sweetgrass got pregnant, he's been trying to do all the housework himself, while she just lies down and rests for the entire pregnancy. You jest, said Two Hawks. Liam shook his head and laughed. Getting a woman to lie down for 9 moons while the man does all the chores would drive her to insanity. All the men laughed at Azariah's expense. At the same time, they gave him encouragement and comfort as he continued to pace. Be calm, He Who Walks Tall, said Wandering Bear. Women have been having babies since time immemorial. I know, said Azariah, but it still makes me nervous. Azariah had every reason to be nervous. While pregnancy and childbirth were always considered a joyous blessing, it was also very dangerous. Death from childbirth was not uncommon. Liam O'Reilly joked that he couldn't count the number of times he found the father to be on his knees, praying that Sweetgrass would come through and deliver a healthy baby. Jokes aside, however, the Irishmen, as well as many of their Arapaho friends, strongly sympathized with Azariah, and they too prayed for successful delivery. It was at that exact moment that the sound of a baby was heard wailing from inside the lodge. Azariah and all the men present stood in anticipation. Gideon was on all 4 paws, wagging his tail as if he knew the outcome. The deerskin hide flap opened, and Black Shawl appeared with a huge smile on her face. You have a beautiful and healthy son, He Who Walks Tall. Azariah collapsed to his knees with a huge sigh of relief, while Liam, Two Hawks, and everyone present yipped, whooped, and cheered to high heaven. Gideon joined in the celebration with a couple of barks, wagging his tail and giving his master a saliva bath all over his face, as if to say congratulations. Before getting back on his feet, the new father asked Black Shawl if Sweetgrass was all right. Black Shawl nodded and smiled at him as she held the flap open for him. She waits for you, she said, along with your new son. Inside the lodge, the new mother held her tiny infant, who had stopped crying and was sucking on his fingers. Azariah slowly approached his wife and new son. Tears of joy were falling down both sides of his cheeks as he got a good look at the infant. Do you wish to hold your son? Asked Sweetgrass. Azariah nodded and gently held out his huge hands as Sweetgrass gave the baby to him. The boy looked like a full-blooded Arapaho, with the exception that his eyes were blue, and he had his father's forehead and big nose. Azariah smiled as he cradled his new pride and joy in his arms, gently touching the baby's tiny hands with a forefinger.
"What shall we name him?" asked Sweetgrass.
"His name is Hancock," he said. "I've always liked Adam. Adam Hancock." "It is a good name," said Howling Wolf as he entered the lodge, followed by his father, Liam, Wandering Bear, Nightwing, and Black Shawl. "He must have an Arapaho name as well," said Azariah, "for he is both white and Arapaho." "Agreed," said Two Hawks. "Have we got any candidates?" asked Liam. "You have any ideas, my love?" said Azariah to Sweetgrass. Sweet Bear was in thought for a moment, and then noticed the baby playing with his father's bear claw necklace from his first grizzly bear kill.
"How about Bear Claw?"
Azariah thought for a moment, and then his face lit up in approval. "Adam Bearclaw Hancock," he said. "I love it." "So do we," said Two Hawks with his arm around Clay Basket. "Well done, my daughter." With his new son still in his arms, Azariah approached his mother and father-in-law and gently handed them their new grandson. Clay Basket gently held the baby in her arms, while she and his grandfather beamed with pride. Wandering Bear started to chant and sing in the Arapaho tongue, thanking the man above for this beautiful blessing that has been bestowed upon the family. Liam himself silently said a prayer of thanks to the Creator, and Azariah, holding Sweetgrass's hand, shouted a prayer of thanks to Jesus Christ for the birth of his new son, and that Sweetgrass was well. Later that evening, Sweetgrass had just finished feeding Adam Bearclaw, and gently put him in his new cradle that his father had made 2 days ago. As she sang in her native tongue to rock her tiny infant to sleep, Azariah gently stood over both of them and placed his arm over her shoulder as he beamed with pride, while looking down at his brand new son. "He is beautiful," he said, "like his mother." Sweetgrass turned and smiled up at her husband and gently laid her head on his chest.
"Do you miss your family?"
The question caught Azariah a bit off guard, but then he pondered for a moment. "I do," he said. "I often wonder about Abigail and my parents, if they are still alive and if she is married."
"You have rarely spoken about them,"
said Sweetgrass.
"but I know you think of them often."
"I do," said Azariah, "but it is not for me to know about their situation." Sweetgrass was a little surprised by her husband's statement. "God in his own good time will reunite me with my folks," said Azariah. "That is, if it is his will. Otherwise, my place is here by your side, for as long as you will have me."
"Then you shall be by my side forever," said Sweetgrass, "until our last breath."
Azariah smiled and gently kissed his wife, then suddenly picked her up and carried her to her sleeping place. "I will never leave your side," he said, "for we are one on this path, as God has chosen for us." Epilogue. Back in Montgomery County, Maryland, at the Hancock residence, Reverend Nehemiah Hancock sat on his front porch in his rocking chair, with a small child on his lap. The boy appeared to be 1, going on 2 years of age. Humming one of his favorite gospel hymns, the 44-year-old giant gently tickled the little boy, making him laugh in delight. The past 2 years had been far from easy for the Reverend, his wife, Abigail, and their only daughter, little Abigail. Not long after Azariah avenged her brutal rape and had to make his forced departure from their home, exactly 2 years ago, she found out that she was pregnant with the young toddler, who now sat on her father's lap. There was no question who the father was, and even though it was not her fault, Abigail wasn't sure if she could give the baby up for adoption or secretly abort it. Unlike most women in her situation, though, Abigail's parents were strongly supportive of her. Nehemiah discouraged his daughter from having an abortion, but did tell her if she decided to keep the baby or give it up for adoption, he and her mother would always support her 100%. It was a tough decision for the 14-year-old rape victim, now mother-to-be. Her parents' comfort, support, and encouragement made things a lot easier. The family even got surprise support from their friends, the Allen family. Young Jason Allen in particular pledged that he would be there for Abigail and the child, if she chose to keep it, in the best way he possibly could. The decision wasn't easy, but she told their parents that she was keeping the baby. On December 1st, 1820, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy, whom she named Caleb Nehemiah Hancock. The only people who knew the child's paternity were the Reverend, his wife, and the Allen family. Since the attack, little Abigail, as she was still called by her father, never went to town, for she didn't want Sheriff Frederick Jones to know that he had a grandson. Not that he probably cared anyway. Jason Allen, with the Reverend's permission, would escort little Abigail and her mother to town and back, well armed. The good Reverend would babysit his grandson, and sometimes take him over to the Allen plantation and spend time with them. On days such as this, he would sit in his rocking chair, with his grandson in his arms or on his lap, as he got bigger and pondered while staring west. He was brought out of his reverie when a hand touched his shoulder. "Penny for your thoughts, Nehemiah?" asked his wife. The good Reverend just smiled at her, before returning his attention to Caleb, who by this time held his arms out to his grandmother. "Grandma," he said. Abigail gently took him from his grandfather and hugged him as the boy's mother approached from the kitchen in an apron covered with flour. "Dinner will be ready soon," said little Abigail. The little boy gently waved to her and got a gentle peck on the cheek from his mother in response. "Boy is getting big," said Nehemiah. "That is because he comes from a strong flock," said Abigail, from his mother's side. Little Abigail smiled, but deep down she was still troubled. She loved her son deeply and never blamed him for how he was conceived, but it was clear that she saw a lot of Belshazzar Jones in Caleb, and that brought her much anguish. Sensing their daughter's melancholy, Nehemiah and Abigail invited her to stay a while and enjoy the scenery, before returning to the kitchen. "You all right, child?" asked Nehemiah. Little Abigail nodded. "It is beautiful today." As they looked into the forest of this terrific spring day, the family began to feel at peace. "I wish Azariah was here," little Abigail said suddenly. "I miss him too," added her mother. "I pray he is still alive." Nehemiah finally stood and wrapped his huge arms around his wife, daughter, and grandson. "Wherever he is," he said, "at least he is safe and forever free." Little Abigail looked up at her father with a quizzical look. "How do you know that, Papa?" Nehemiah smiled and looked at the heavens, before returning his gaze to his daughter. "Because God is with him." This concludes Chosen Paths, Edge of the World Series, Book 1, by LeRoy A. Peters. Copyright by LeRoy A. Peters, and published by Dusty Saddle Publishing, a division of DS Productions.
We hope you have enjoyed this story. You can find many more books by LeRoy Peters on Amazon, available for Kindle and in paperback. This story has been brought to you by Dusty Saddles Publishing, home of the best-selling authors in the Western genre. Visit our website at dspublishingnetwork.com. Please hit the subscribe button and leave us a comment if you've enjoyed listening to this story. Till next time, happy trails.